Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, February 21st, 2025. This is a special budget workshop meeting, budget meeting number 3. We're live in the City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor. I'd like to call this meeting to order at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. We'll start off with roll call. Commissioner Mark Saunders.
Here, present.
Commissioner Suzanne Good.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Stronowski.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Bunky Markert.
Here.
Commissioner Craig Thier.
Here.
Commissioner, Mayor Stan Mills is here. We have a full complement of the mayor and commissioners, and we're able to formally conduct a meeting today because we do have a quorum with us. I'd like to thank everybody that's here watching virtually. I'd also like to thank those few, but some that are present in person. Public comment rules are at the bottom of the agenda, and we'll follow those. Also like to remind everybody, whether you're here in person or not, that we have support documents. Those are documents that support our agenda topics, and they are embedded into the agenda today. And with that, we're going to move on to a mention of correspondence. The one thing I have identified is for the budget meeting is Cape Water Tours sent in a letter regarding management of the canal dock. And otherwise, our old business is to discuss draft budget for fiscal year 2026 as presented by the city manager to include, but not limited to, the following topics today: water, wastewater, revenue, employee health insurance, employee merit increases, mayor and commissioner salaries, and capital budget adjustments. In terms of capital budget adjustments, my hope is that we don't review everything, but some things that are settled that we leave alone, and new things come up, we're able to talk about them. We will not be talking today about the future of the canal dock. There is still data to be collected and estimates to be received. So the canal dock will be on the docket for budget meeting number 4. With that, I want to turn it over to Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Mayor,
Tedder.
a quick question, because although you said we're not talking about the canal boat dock, but let's wrap it up. I did see the email from Cape Water Taxis.
No, I
but
just
there's
said,
no price even named.
You're out of order. We are not talking about
Well,
it today. We need to resolve the,
Well, you referenced the letter from the
You are
from
out of
Cape
order.
Water Taxis, so I think we need to.
What don't you understand about this, Commissioner Good? Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and commissioners, members of the public. Thank you for being here today. So this is our third budget meeting. And today we are going to be going over the enterprise funds as well as some changes that we've made to the budget in general, the spreadsheets, and some other general questions. Our the fourth budget meeting rather, is slated for March 10th. That's our fourth budget meeting. We'll be talking about the community partner contributions, which is a discussion to include the grant requests, and then also have final adjustments, questions, comments at that time, any adjustments to the CIP projects. And then at the March 21st meeting, you'll vote to approve the FY26 annual budget.
Taylor, would you prefer questions throughout or leave them to the end?
Yeah, questions throughout is great. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
and I'd like to remind the commissioners to please get my attention, have me acknowledge, and give you the floor before you speak. Thank you. Taylor, go ahead.
So first, I'd like to go over some changes since our last budget meeting. So I did, per the Board of Commissioners' direction, remove the city planner position and put back in the consulting fees for planning services. We did reduce the error and unemployment and the administration budget. We also identified that we could reduce dispatch overtime by $100,000 since they are fully staffed, which is a great thing. We removed a part-time position in building and grounds. There was an unfilled full-time position that ended up being filled, so we no longer need the part-time position. Both of those existed, but we just don't need that position anymore. We did revisit the rental tax revenue, so that increased slightly, and I will talk about that in a bit. And then we reduced the loan proceeds that we were realizing in the FY26 budget to exactly match the expense of the beach patrol facility that's budgeted in the capital budget. A few other changes, we did increase the chemicals at the wastewater treatment plant as they need more chemicals. And then we moved the museum roof in the CIP out to 2028. The roof's in better shape than it was anticipated, so we just moved that out. And I also removed the electric vehicle charging project because we've done some more research on grants available to us through Energize Delaware, and we believe through grants or the private sector we can fulfill that need, so no need to pay for it if we can utilize grants and the private sector.
Taylor, that reduced dispatch overtime by 100,000, that's merely duplicated in the second slide.
Correct,
So
yes.
it's not 200,000.
Correct.
Thank you.
So first I want to talk about some changes to your actual worksheets that were provided in the agenda. So we did a reforecast of our projections for the fiscal year 25 budget because we wanted to see where are we going to end this year. Of course, with this budget, our team really wants to focus on accuracy, make sure that we're not super conservative and also not aggressive. Wanted to identify any risks and mitigate those. So I wanted to provide a forecast of what our surplus or deficit would be at the end of this fiscal year. And according to the proposed fund balance policy that you'll be considering at the regular meeting this afternoon, the city does have sufficient fund balances in everything except wastewater. So we really wanted to utilize forecasting to assess the budget, and we'll continue to update this through your final meeting. So that will probably not change too much because I do have a lot of confidence that our numbers that we've projected are very accurate related to everything from CIP to our operational budget. So
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for Mr. Tedder.
Commissioner Good?
I'm very concerned that because we borrowed 5.5 million, 3.017 of which is propping up this budget, that you're not telling the public the truth about Rehoboth Beach's fiscal position.
yeah, that's what
Mayor,
I'm getting ready to.
Mayor, could I field that question, please?
I'm sorry, what?
It's okay, Taylor, can I field that question
Yeah,
for you?
sure.
Can I respond?
No.
Okay, so we're not using $3 million to prop up the budget, okay? We could have a separate conversation about, to me, the borrowing for the beach patrol station within itself is a separate conversation. What we're doing is we borrowed money to pay for the beach patrol station. So in this upcoming fiscal year, we're going to incur about $2.4 million in costs for that beach patrol station. And what we're doing is that we're using the proceeds of the loan to pay for that. We're not using anything to prop up any budget. These are loan proceeds that were voted on by these mayors and commissioners to
Except
pay.
for me.
Let me finish.
Don't
That's fine.
interrupt.
But again, the motion passed. We're using the loan proceeds, as this mayor and commissioners approved, to pay for the expenses of the beach patrol station. We're not propping up any budget.
Taylor, do you have any?
Thank you, Mayor.
Further?
I disagree respectfully.
That's fine. You can disagree. You know,
Taylor?
Suzanne, you can disagree all you want, and you can go downstairs and get Coast TV to come here and do another interview
All
if
righty.
you'd like.
Let me go to Taylor. Do you have anything you want to add or augment to Commissioner Thier's response to Suzanne?
No, it's accurate. Let's move on to the next slide.
All righty, thank you.
So on our fiscal year 25 forecast, so this is this current budget year. So we are looking at about a $2 million surplus in our water fund. Wastewater does have about $1 million underperformance. So essentially what happened with that, we had an overpayment of Dewey Beach and Henlopen Acres wastewater in '24. So this year, we actually paid back those overpayments, so that made our revenue off. And then in operations, we had a $4.5 million surplus, which does include the $3 million of beach patrol. But it also included underspending and savings in the operational line items. So essentially, where we're landing with this current fiscal year, we will have about $5.6 million that will be surplus. So that will lead to my next slide of what do you want to do with that? And we don't have to make a decision on this today, but essentially, if we choose to do nothing, this will just roll into fund balance and increase our fund balances, which could be a choice that you decide to go with. Other options, you could look at moving up other projects that are slated in later years. You could look at the first block of the Baltimore streetscape to coincide with the one Rehoboth project and Beach Patrol to maybe create a kind of example for what our streetscapes could look like on all of those streets. We've also been looking into fiber optic, a loop throughout the city, so all of our city facilities could be on one fiber loop and have cameras throughout the entire boardwalk on fiber. Code revisions, we could jumpstart that and do more work on that. We have budgeted $100,000 for that in the next several years, but yes, so this is just some ideas for you, and I'll just pause here for a second.
Mayor, if I could, please.
Commissioner Gossett?
Thank you, Taylor. This total projected surplus, is that reflective of funding, if you will, the fund balance policy as we have discussed it? So that this is reflective over and above funding of the fund balance policy as we have discussed?
Correct. So this does not include funding more into wastewater, though.
Correct.
So this, but yes, this is over what the current fund balance policy numbers are in your packet for this afternoon.
Commissioner Marker?
You were next. Go ahead. Just continuing on that, the analysis that you provided with regard to the fund balance policy, can that be basically updated to sort of reflect what the fund balance situation would likely be by the end of the fiscal year? I mean, to kind of get a better handle of that?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Mayor, if I could, please.
Commissioner Thayer?
Thank you, Mayor. So couple of things I wanted to point out, just, as it relates to the surplus. So later today in the regular session, I think has been mentioned, we're going to be, the plan, as the agenda says, we're going to vote on a fund balance policy, okay? As part of that policy, and this is really the point I wanted to make, is if our fund balance is above the numbers that we specify in there, the city manager has to come back with a plan as to what to do with that fund balance. So I just kind of draw that back to here and a couple of the comments that were made. So with the exception of wastewater, we're at our fund balances based on what we're going to vote on this afternoon. So somebody's going to have, I want to use the term somebody, I'll use that term loosely, but a plan will have to be developed, which could be, we'll just put more money in our fund balance. I'm not saying we should or should not do that, or how are we going to use that fund balance? So a plan based on what we're going to do this afternoon, or the intent is what we're going to do this afternoon, a plan will have to be developed by, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Taylor, plan's going to have to be developed initially by the city manager as to what to do with this. So, I mean, I think it's important to listen to some of the recommendations that he's made. I don't think we have to make a decision today. I suspect you'll come back to us with recommendations.
Certainly, and definitely can base it off of any comments you have today, but sure.
The one thing I did want to point out here, just for clarification purposes, so on this possible uses of FY25 surplus in the FY26 budget, we have wastewater 3B. This is a timing issue. So this was in the 25 budget to be done. It was budgeted for $2 million. It's not happening in 25. So what I'd like to see really as a best practice in a normal course going forward is you take that money and you move it into the next year because it's a timing issue, right? We didn't spend it last year. So let's move it into 26 and use it there. So that would be a use of the surplus, okay? Rather than rolling into fund balance and then having to find additional monies to fund that. That's just kind of normal practice. So it's something that, I recommend for this year, and as we go forward in future years, you're always going to have timing issues with large construction projects, always, right? Because there's delays, whatever it may be. So those are the types of, that's just an example of one thing we're really going to want to look going forward. If we've got a timing issue, we take the surplus funds and we move it into the next year. So that's something that I would definitely recommend that we do. Some of the other things, obviously, it's up to us as a group to decide what to do. So thank you, Mayor. That was it. I appreciate it.
Since this is a introductory topic, again, there's plenty of time in the future for us to bring back so that we can look at these individually and determine a path forward. Anybody else? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Good?
I have a real problem with the whole conversation. We just borrowed over 10% of this year's $43.7 million budget. So I think it's specious and deceptive to talk about having a surplus. Now, maybe in the short term, because we did borrow the $5.5 million back in November or early December, whenever that was, perhaps. And I have no problem in using this specious surplus to fund the wastewater Phase 3B. That's absolutely critical infrastructure, possibly even these LED lights, because that's been sort of on the books for a while. The code revisions, if there's any chance it will reduce our crushing legal fees, also seems like a good use of money. But in my view, the 60 million and probably more expensive streetscape, including gathering together a task force again with a consultant that Mr. Tedder will have run it once again, because that task force, I think, was already in existence between about 2017 and then COVID hit, so almost 3 years. So we already spent a lot of money on a project which we probably can't afford. The main problem is we have taken on almost $75 million in debt. So if you want to call it a surplus, fine, but I'm not on board. We need to put what you call a surplus toward paying down debt, and/or we quickly need to cut 10% from every department insofar as possible, not the things like administration particularly, which will include, and we'll get to later in this discussion, this is not a time to start growing salaries, bonuses, health insurance coverage for the non-police component of our staff. So I'm really concerned that we are operating in sort of an illusion of fiscal soundness. And I don't know, I think the point might be to try to convince yourselves maybe, or to not acknowledge the truth. The truth hurts. We have to look at this very differently from the way I'm seeing it. I mean, what city which just borrowed $5.5 million will allege that we have a $5.66 million surplus? It's absolutely absurd, surreal. Thank you.
Thank you. Taylor, go ahead.
All right. So the next thing that we added to your budget worksheets in the packet is the fiscal year 27 forecast. So on the fiscal year 27 forecast, we really wanted to see, okay, so yes, personnel is the most expensive thing that local governments have. Costs are going up. Are we able to handle this in the long term? So we are working towards this 3-year forecast of the operational budget, similar to the 5-year CIP capital budget plan. So, wanted to know, are we anticipating a deficit? If so, then we need to look at raising revenues or reducing expenses. Are we anticipating a surplus? If so, we need to identify future budget needs. So with our assumptions for fiscal year 27, we are making the assumption that we will add no staff in 27, maintaining our current level of staffing. The CIP would increase $1.9 million because that would be additional work on Phase 4 and additional PFAS water filtration upgrades. Assumed a 2% COLA on staff, and then a 3% increase in general costs. So that puts us around 46.5 million in revenue and expenditures, where, you know, a slight little surplus there. So,
Mayor, if I could, please.
Commissioner Thier?
Thank you, Mayor. So just a couple of comments on the last few slides, you know, particularly the new ones. Things we haven't done in the past, current year forecast, so FY25 forecast, FY27 forecast. The intent there is to put us, the people up here, in a situation where we have better, more accurate data, so we can look at not only what we want to do now, but we can look at going forward, okay? You know, one of the reasons why we've accumulated large surpluses over the past few years is because we haven't done this FY25 forecast, right? To understand, will we have a surplus? Will we have a deficit? If we have a surplus like we're projecting this year, how can we proactively address that? Same thing with FY27. Right now, we're looking at, you know, what looks like roughly a balanced budget. So we know as we pass the 26 budget, do we have any major concerns for 27? Would we have a substantial deficit that we may need to be planning to address now? As of right now, we don't. I will tell you, you know, from 2 weeks ago, I feel significantly more comfortable with the accuracy of the budget and the process that we're following. I would like to see us, and probably not for this year, but as we go into next year, I want to see us to do 2 out years. So, for example, instead of just 27, see a 27 and 28. Probably be a little more proactive in terms of getting that 25 projection in front of us earlier in the cycle. But overall, I'm very comfortable and very pleased with the work that Taylor and the team has done to get us this 25 forecast, to get us the 26 budget, to get us the 27 forecast. Yeah, I don't think there's any question, you know, again, back to Commissioner Good, you know, look, she makes a good point, right? I don't think there's any question that we could question today the need to borrow money for the beach patrol station. But if we had this forecast a year ago when I wasn't here, when there was a decision made to increase taxes and fees, if there was an option to, instead of paying cash for the beach patrol station, but to borrow, that would have erased that deficit. So this is the whole point of expanding this process and adding new data to the process so that as we sit here today, we can make the right decisions. As far as debt, I know there was a reference to paying down debt. I'm not opposed to that, but we do have a lot of debt that is at like 1%, 0%, 2%. So that always needs to come into consideration as to whether that makes sense or not. And that's just kind of an aside point. But again, I feel much more comfortable where we are. And again, I think the team has done a great job. They've done a lot of work in the last couple of weeks to really just put this data together. So again, I thank them.
Thank you. Commissioner Markert? Yeah.
I just wanted to make an additional comment. I certainly concur with Commissioner Thier's comments. The idea that certainly looking back on last year and how that process, how that compares to this process is night and day as far as I'm concerned. And one of the things when I look back on last year, where we were kind of in the dark with a number of things, the least of which, or the greatest of which, I think, was having to raise the property tax, which I think if we knew then what we knew now, we probably wouldn't have done it. And I guess what I would like to consider moving forward, you know, obviously there's a lot of things in motion at this time, but in conjunction with the you know, getting a handle on the fund balance policy and how that cranks out and all that kind of stuff, that we would consider possibly a rollback on property taxes, that we, you know, in conjunction with whatever surplus that we have. So I'd just like to throw that out there. Okay.
Thank you. Taylor, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So I did just want to put this, you know, full 360-degree view up here of these 3 different budget numbers here. summarizing what we've just went through.
Mayor,
Commissioner
if I may,
Gossett, yes.
just a follow-up question to this 5, 6, and 7 comparison. Do you also as bringing this forward, setting a time schedule of when this would be reviewed? I know we've talked about perhaps quarterly with the fund balance review and also statement of our investments, but to tie this to some type of proposed schedule so that it sort of doesn't get lost, that we can make sure that this is on a quarterly basis or whatever you suggest, you and your team suggest, but that it is sometimes, I won't say codified, but at least a procedure going forward so that this is in place and followed upon each and every, multiple times during the year so we know where we are.
Sure. So in previous positions, I've done like a quarterly financial health report where that could accomplish something like this. Also a 5-year financial plan. So those are some things that I would like to move towards, and now we do have some of the framework in place to do that. So I'll give that some thought and see how we can make that a reality.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Good?
Mr. Tedder, I'd like to know where you arrived at the assumption of a rental tax revenue increase for fiscal year 2026. I just think projections are unreliable. It's like trying to project inflation, so the same thing applies. For instance, you're assuming we'll only have to provide a 2% COLA in fiscal year 2027. I think that prediction is not worth anything. No economist is going to know. In fact, people have been more often wrong than right about the rate of growth of inflation or deflation. So the rental tax revenue increasing, that's an assumption where you're trying to assume, well, you're assuming that we're going to get more of it. On what is that based?
Sure, it's based on data. So the rental tax went from 6 to 7%, which is a 16.67% change. So looking at last year's revenues, we increased that 10%, which is less than the 16.67, so trying to be conservative. Ultimately, all of that revenue has not come in yet, so we'll have better data at the next meeting, but it is an educated guess.
Okay, so it's going from 6 to 7%, and we can't know for sure what the actual volume of rentals will be, but you're hopeful.
Right.
You're assuming the economy will be strong, because rental property owners are telling me, unfortunately, they're not having as many bookings in advance, by like February 1st, February 15th, as they have in past years. So I think that might be an overly optimistic assumption.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. So, Mayor, I think at this point, this might be a good time to see if there's any questions from members of the public before we move to commissioner salaries and some other items.
Sure. Commissioner Legree, come to the microphone, state your name and relationship to the city, please. Remember, we have a 3-minute time limit if you would keep an eye on the clock.
This is easier for me.
Go ahead.
Could you extrapolate a little bit on that 1.6 overpayment and how you're going to apply that? I'm assuming you're going to apply the whole thing. And is it all come from that overpay of Dewey Beach? Thank you.
So 1.6. Bert, can you talk a little bit about that? I'm not sure where the 1.6. We didn't talk about 1.6.
Yeah, just have ask. I'm sorry, Mayor. I
ahead.
apologize.
Go
Thank you. Maybe you could ask Mr. Legree to just clarify his question, because there is a 1.6 encumbrance number in here, so I'm not sure if he's referring to that or to the overpayment of Dewey Beach. Thank you.
Thank you for making that distinction.
I live in Prospect Street, and if they are related.
Okay.
That's related.
The 1.6 that we're talking about was basically the money when we did the outfall that we did not need for the outfall. So we essentially invested that in CD, so it's sitting in cash and it can be used. The overpayment for Dewey Beach and Henlopen Acres came about as an overbilling. Well, we estimate quarterly based upon the percentage of flows that are coming in. And we bill very similar to paying estimated taxes. And there were some capital items in there that probably didn't need to be. So this was an unusual year, and that typically we're a lot closer. And so we overbilled, and basically we paid the money back to the county in FY25. So the overbilling really occurred in FY24, but the money was paid in FY25 to refund the county.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, if I could,
Commissioner Shanowski?
why is it, why, I guess simplistically, why do we do it that way?
Well,
Why do we estimate and then do a true up rather than just bill them for the actual?
Well, see, we don't really know until the end of the year, till we get the audited financial statements. And I use those audited numbers from the wastewater to go ahead and do the allocations. Well, the percentage, the flows really aren't complete until well after year end. I mean, you're probably talking April before we get the flow. So what we have to do, we have to calculate the percentage that each of the participants in the sewer plant used. So for Hobith, this past year used 36%. We're basically allocating 36%. So it's very similar to just paying your taxes. I mean, at the end of the year, you true
I
up.
understand now.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving. So I wanted to revisit the mayor and commissioner salary discussion. So an update, interim solicitor Walton did provide his opinion on this. So in our charter, it does say that this is set at the annual meeting, which is in, I believe, September. So I did want to talk about this because we do have 2 seats up in 2026. So that would be one thing for it to take effect then. But I just want to put this out there for further discussion.
Well, yeah, let me, I thought we kind of put it to bed, but I'm fine with bringing it back. It has given me a little time to think a little bit, and one of the things is has to do with my mention of a per meeting fee, and I think the accounting for that could be done. That's no big deal, and I said it was to encourage attendance. And perhaps penalized monetarily if you're not attending. And I really don't like that. I think I prefer just a better quality of candidate and commissioner from the outset. You know, that they come here and they know how many meetings approximately there's going to be. You know, I think we're past the days when we're just having a workshop in a regular meeting. You know, we're going to have maybe twice that many meetings. So I haven't seen any formula that I can ascertain from your list here that's been updated since the last meeting. But I also don't think it's intended to be a career for any of us, and so, you know, have such a high salary. So where I want to go from there, I don't know. You know, maybe it would be fair to match what Lewis does or something, but I'm also content with just leaving it alone. So Commissioner Saunders?
I was just going to add that by all means, I don't know how early we can start the September agenda, but I'd like to have it on and follow the instructions that we've been given by Mr. Walton to making a discussion, or having a discussion at that time. And if indeed we come to an agreement, have it take effect, as Mr. Walton had suggested that the charter allows us to do. That's all I have to say.
Well, I guess the one consideration would be, if we address it today, then it can be in the budget, and otherwise, you've just got to find the money at the time if we do move forward in September.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Good?
For background, when we held the discussion, unfortunately, the wording in the charter hadn't yet been uncovered. However, having said that, given that the current wage is, Delaware just raised its minimum wage, I believe, on January 1st to $15 an hour, given that the current salary is below minimum wage, and given that Lewis holds about a third as many meetings as we do, and also its budget, because it hasn't ballooned like ours has from 27.7 million to 43.8 million in just the last 4 years. Their budget is about half ours, so I'm not sure Lewis is comparable. But the main problem I have, it may need a charter change in Dover, because the salary was set in the 1990s and doesn't reflect the 21st century. And because I believe one of the reasons Mr. Tedder was hired in the way that he was poor judgment on the part of the majority of the commissioners who don't have background in finance or law enough to have made the right decision. And furthermore, the city violated the charter on the qualifications of the city manager. So it seems like we're invoking the charter when it suits us, but in this instance, where there's an opportunity to get beyond the 1990s, the charter is being invoked in a way that seems inappropriate. So I would say, I think my reasonable motion that we would need, we could have someone in City Hall like Mr. Miller write wording to not allow the mayor and commissioners, say, to set their salaries any higher than, we might put a $10,000 threshold for the commissioners. And I had made a motion that the salary be increased to $5,000 annually for each commissioner, which, by the way, is still below minimum wage when you take into account all the time that's put in, and $10,000 for the mayor. And I would still want to go with that, because I believe the city is being poorly run, because we're not going to have an opportunity this summer to attract candidates with serious legal or financial background unless we make a change quickly. This is a tiny investment. Even at that would be $40,000 total. I've been fighting against consultants. One consultancy alone was $47,000 that we just spent with an outside consultant instead of having city employees do the work that this consultant is doing. And in that particular case, we had two members of the mixed-use task force saying they didn't need the $47,000 consultant. We have like
Suzanne,
we have an incompetence, and we have an incompetence up here that partly reflects the lack of pay. You have to have people with nothing better to do with their time, it might seem, to be running a $43.8 million budget, which, unlike the town of Lewis, for instance, has grown at a very fast clip. So unless we want to rein in spending properly, with the current type of people who seem to be presenting for the board, we will fail as we have.
Well, then shall we move this to the September meeting?
Yes, Mayor, if we could,
That
please.
would be my
Commissioner
recommendation.
Thayer, go ahead, restate.
Sorry. Okay.
Go ahead. I was going to
Commissioner
say, yeah, let's move to the September meeting.
But
Commissioner
just
Marker?
a question, though. If we have this discussion in the September, is it my understanding that it wouldn't go in effect until the following year? So it wouldn't need to be budgeted, would it?
It would be the next fiscal year, so it doesn't affect this budget.
Right. So,
And it's only for, if I understood Mr. Walton's, what he had said, you don't get it until you're reseated or reelected?
Correct. Reelected or a new person takes the seat.
so
Right,
what-
so it'd be the next term. So like in Commissioner Markert's case, 2026 comes, reelected, then
Might
you
have
would
to get
have the
reelected
new,
this
then you
year,
would have the, or 25, right, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Commissioner Gossett?
yes, thank you. Just to share information that we've received in this from Max Walton, our interim attorney at the moment, just his concluding paragraph, based on his research of the city charter, says, based on the foregoing, his comments, the city cannot increase commissioner salaries immediately or during the current term of any commissioner. Instead, if a salary increase is desired, the commission may consider increasing the salaries of all commissioners going forward, but these salaries would be effective only for newly elected commissioners at the start of their designated term, or, in the case of a re-elected commissioner, upon the beginning of the new term. As a result, due to the staggered terms of the commissioners, there may be situations where the various commissioners will have different salaries. So that's the interpretation of the charter, and I would also suggest that we bring this up at the regular meeting, as he has suggested, in September, but based on the charter as we understand it and has been interpreted by the attorney. I'm also take comment or question on the comment if we can adjust the charter as needed, as Commissioner Good has said, when we are facing a $90,000 legal fee right now because of a misinterpretation supposedly of the charter. So I will not want to expend any more tax money on a charter misinterpretation for this purpose, knowing going into it that, oh, well, we can change it as we want to. Thank you, Mayor.
All righty, we've got a path forward, and
Mr.
and
Mayor,
we
I'd
have a
like to
path forward.
I
and-
don't think we have a path forward. I think invoking the
You don't
charter
have the
now-
floor, Commissioner. If you want the floor, I have never denied anybody the floor, but
I
you
just
have
asked for
to, you
the
have to
floor.
be acknowledged. You can't ask and then immediately start talking. Wait for the chair to acknowledge you.
I said, Mr. Mayor, I'm not
Go ahead.
sure.
We do have a path forward, but go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, some in your block do have a path forward. I think it's almost shameful at this point, when I've already put this out there in public view, that we, what you did, I think, within 48 hours of the meeting where it was first raised, is you had the attorney find a narrative that fit your agenda. It didn't work when hiring a city manager who had he had 2.5 years of city manager experience, not the requisite 4 years in the charter, and he also, lacked an engineering degree as well. So in that case, you didn't worry about it. So if it's so simple somehow to ignore the charter, and the spirit of the charter does not have people working for less than minimum wage. In fact, the Delaware Department of Labor, from what I read on their website, it may be a violation of labor laws to be paying elected officials not only less than their campaign expenses, but less than minimum wage. So, you're claiming to abide by the law, and you're using this attorney. Unfortunately, I think that was take issue with hiring him to look in the charter and then explain how it has to be done. In fact, you'd have to have it staggered, because some terms, of course, every year you have 2 or 3 out of the 7 leaving or whatever. I think one of the problems, there's a paralysis here in not making decisions and always deferring them. And so I would like to make a motion that we have Mr. Miller go to the, put something in writing that we can never exceed, say, a $10,000 threshold. That would allow us to put this in soon enough so that we will encourage people with background this summer who aren't people who will go along with the mayor, who will be appointed by the various factions in town, who don't seem to have a clear vision for this city. They think growing the city hall budget by 58.1% in 4 fiscal years is appropriate for a town where the tax base, because it's only 3,400 parcels, is not measurably growing. So I think we're going to just have as bad a situation this summer because of our bad decisions now and not taking action on this. Can I would like to make a motion to get the charter changed, which is a minor change, because to reflect the fact that the salary is so laughably low. I mean, Lewis has half our budget, and it's paying 5 times more than we are.
Mayor, is there a motion?
So I would like to make a motion to get the charter change and for fiscal year 2026, have commissioner pay be $5,000 per commissioner, and the mayoral pay be $10,000 for Mayor Mills.
Is there a motion, second?
Is comment, do we make a comment?
I'd like to see whether there's a second or not, because if not, then this is moot. I certainly won't second it. Anybody else? And so the motion fails. Commissioner Saunders?
I don't need to make it now. I was just gonna make the point that I'm afraid, I understand where Commissioner Good is coming from on that, but I think that it would take till September anyhow to have a charter change. So what would we be gaining?
All right.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I'll just clarify, please. I have the floor.
Commissioner Good?
In fact, the State House in Dover is only in session from January until June 30th. So the charter change could be effected it usually takes 4 to 6 weeks. They don't meet every day. They meet maybe 2 days a week, and then they take recesses. But it could be done, I would think, realistically by May 1st. So instead of this pay going into effect April 1st, the way Mr. Tedder is proposing all of these things go into effect April 1st, 2025 with the new fiscal year, fine, it could go into effect May 1st. But, you know, as long as I've raised the issue, and I wasn't aware of, and that's on me, of quite how much work this job would involve, especially fighting against what I feel is a tendency to overspend. We have a city manager and a mayor who are complicit in this, and it's very hard to go up. I have been trying, and it's a very difficult task. We need better people up here. We desperately need better people up here this August election, and the people who have considered it have mentioned the fact that the problem is it's too much time, and some of them have said, yeah, if it did pay something, it might just be that little sop you need to give up some of your time as an attorney or working as a consultant. But where we are now is laughable.
All right, we're going to be moving on. Suzanne, you have another opportunity come September or whenever we get this back on the agenda with moving forward. I do want to take this moment to, as chair, to say your consistent and constant disparaging of the commissioners, the mayor, the solicitor, the city manager, the assistant city manager, and everybody is not appreciated, and your mention too many times of allegations that are not provable are very inappropriate, I believe. So with that, Commissioner Gossett.
I would ask, though, if the city manager would prepare a draft charter change to propose this salary adjustment or charter change to provide this for the September workshop, so that we can have a discussion on this, so we would have our ducks in a row, if you mind, that we have something to talk about as opposed to just conversation.
Mr. Mayor,
No, wait a minute.
I want to respond to Commissioner
All
Gossett.
righty, just hold on 1 minute. Commissioner Good?
Commissioner Gossett, I mean, this is sort of the ossification and deferring everything. The minute you hold the initial discussion on this in September, The State House is not in session again at that point till January 1st. So instead of taking care of things, I mean, we did, at the last meeting, there were so many opportunities. I wanted to like make a decision on things. We did make a decision finally on the new planner. That was the only thing, but on so many other things. Why? One of the reasons these meetings are running so long is we can't make any decisions in a timely way. We're always saying, well, we'll consider it, whatever. And now you're saying September. I think it's dysfunctional.
I was following on the suggestion of Commissioner Mark. You had suggested bringing it up in September, and I just wanted to take some action on it. If you disagree with that, that's fine. You can make another suggestion to the city manager of action to be taken.
I also need to add that I take issue. I do hold a lot of the people you mentioned in high regard, including Mr. Miller. So I'm not sure where the mayor starts making a laundry list of people I've somehow disparaged. I think that was unfair. I feel I was thrown under the bus at the last discussion of this because
It's out of order. Let's move on. We're done this and we're being repetitive.
And
Taylor,
Mayor,
would
if I
you
may,
like to-
I just wanted to provide some clarification to the public. So under the Fair Labor Standards Act, elected officials are specifically excluded from coverage of that, Section 3E2C, meaning they're not considered employees and not entitled to minimum wage and overtime protections. So I just wanted to let you know that. Moving on, so one of the deliverables tasked to me at the last meeting was to come with a breakdown of what our city staff looks like. So we do have a lot of 129 positions doing meaningful work. So, public safety does meaningful work, so does Public Works. We need water. We need our toilets to flush with wastewater. We need, all of our grounds kept. And then in administrative employees, they're also doing meaningful work with utility billing, making sure that your water doesn't get shut off because you made your payment, and all of the other different functions that we do. So 24% of our staff is in admin and non-public safety enforcement. So that's finance department, IT, communications, building licensing, and our alderman, which is confirmed by the governor based on your recommendation. So in the last 5 years, there were 5 positions added and 1 removed. Public Works makes up 48% of our employees: water, wastewater, streets, fleet, and building and grounds. So in the last 5 years, 9 positions were added there. And public safety, 28% of our workforce, so police, dispatch, and all of our beach patrol folks. Last 5 years, 3 positions were added and 1 was just removed. Yes, I'll stop here for any questions.
So Taylor, these 129 positions and the percentages are based on full-timers?
It's full-time and part-time, so we have
And
18
part-time.
part-time employees out of that 129.
18, okay. That's what, 100 and, I can't do the math.
11.
I'm sorry, this,
111, and then seasonals.
So seasonals weren't included in this.
Do you have numbers by any
Yep, so
chance?
for beach patrol, we're hiring 80 seasonals.
Okay,
For police, we're hiring 16. For streets will be 6. And then for parking is 27. Oh, I'm sorry, streets also has the parking meter techs. We hire 4 of those outside of their streets laborers.
and
thank you. Commissioner Sernowski?
the percentages are based on the number of employees or based on the financial impact on the budget?
The number of employees.
Anybody else?
So continuing on this same train of thought, so we were also asked to come back with information about our vacancies, turnover, and difficult to fill positions. So we currently have several vacant positions. The network engineer, we're currently evaluating applications. We are getting some. The deputy city clerk, they're currently in the interview process. So I'm sure Ann's excited to have some help soon. We have 2 police positions open. which 4 candidates are in the background stage, and then have interviews at the end of the month. The academy starts April 27th. We're advertising for wastewater operator. The wastewater positions are one of the more difficult to fill positions, especially since they have to get certain certifications, et cetera. And then we have an open mechanic position at our fleet services division, so we are advertising for that. The past 5 years, we've had an average of 10% turnover, and the highest year was 17%, which included the loss of 5 dispatchers. So that was a big blow for that division. The lowest year was 6% in 2024, and we're attributing to that the implementation of that compensation study that was done. So the most difficult to fill position, water operators, we've had those positions open 400 and 350 days. CDL operators for wastewater, days open 300. Street CDL operators, days open 215. And I do want to note that we do in-house CDL training. Our fleet services manager, Art, he does that, and it's a huge value to the city. It's very expensive to do that if you're not doing it yourself. Mechanic, days open 330. Arborist was open just 270 days, and building inspector had been open 240 days before that position was filled. So just a little flavor of all of the personnel.
Is there any guess as to why these positions are so difficult to fill? I think we know from about seasonals and the problem with workforce housing and stuff like that, but do you have any idea? Is it salary? I mean, that.
I'll have Jean take this one.
So now our salaries are up. Last year when we did the compensation study, we brought our salaries up significantly. So all these numbers were before the salary. So I think it does have to do with the salary because our water operators, our wastewater operators, we're competing with the county. We're also competing with private businesses that are running these utilities. So to attract people that are already certified in them has been difficult. With our CDL operators, we actually have only hired from within, except for one, we were able to get a seasonal CDL driver to start. But our CDL program and earning the CDLs through that program is how we filled these CDL positions. We took people from streets department that did not have CDLs, trained them, got them CDLs, and then they could fill those positions. We didn't even get those from outside the city. And then we were able to fill those labor positions a little quicker than the CDL positions. A lot of them they all have licenses or requirements in these positions, so we got to attract them to come here. The mechanic job, I think salary, right now it's open, we've only got 3 applications, and I think the salary is going to be an issue with it, just in doing some research with other mechanic jobs that are open out there. Working for a municipality, you typically get paid a little less, but we got to draw a mechanic from a mechanic shop where they're advertising a lot more. I think we're going to have to look at the mechanic position and possibly up that one, but it does have to do with a lot with salary and attracting people to come here.
Well, and my understanding of losing an arborist to another outside private firm was a salary issue, perhaps, but also, I think maybe some of the problems like arborists, there aren't a wealth of arborists around that we can just hand pick.
Yeah, that position was hard to fill because they have to have that certification per our code, and you have to have 5 years of experience to even test for it. So even in looking for somebody that could test within a year, they had to have 5 years of experience that they could even sit for a test before we could hire them.
Thank you. Anybody? Commissioner Thier?
So, I mean, should we be looking at the code? If our code requires, certain experience or certification, should we be looking at the code?
I don't think in looking at positions in the code and stuff that there's anywhere we would want to cut back on the certifications. I think we would have to probably go the other way and be able to attract the people that are certified. Because most of the code, you know, where things are required, we really do need those certifications. Like the arborist, there's a lot of decision-making in that position, and I don't think it would be fair to the city or the residents to bring in somebody that doesn't have the experience. So I think it's just, we have to up our game a little to attract the right candidates.
It's easy for me to say, but I mean, can we look at, you know, I understand what you're saying, but, you know, when we get in these situations where we can't find people, you know, there's then we just continue to ramp up the salary, right? And that, in the end, really doesn't work either. So is there a way to look at how the position, you know, the person does their job? I appreciate that, like, there's certain experience, you know, if you put 5 trees in front of me, I'd probably get, you know, 5 wrong, right? And I'm being a little facetious here, so I appreciate there's some level of experience and expertise, but could we look at the position and maybe change the way the position operates so that we could, you know, require a less experienced person? I appreciate it's easy for me to say, and I don't even want you to answer this question because this is probably really a question for the city manager. But if we've got positions that we can't fill, then we should probably think about, you know, how we're going about getting the work done and ultimately filling the positions. Because just continuing to increase the pay, you know, that's a vicious cycle.
I do have one comment. Most of these listed here, like water operator and CDL, those are legally required. Like, you have to have a CDL to drive our trash truck. There's no change in that. The water operators and wastewater operators have to have their licensing through the DENREC in order to operate our systems. We can. Really, the only one on here may be arborist and building inspector that we choose the requirements for.
All right, thank you.
Just one other
Commissioner
question.
Markert, and then who? And then Mark?
It's just a question for Gene. Is the weight, for the ones we just spoke of, arborist and maybe building inspector, what's the length of time typically to get the certification? For like an average candidate, let's say, I mean, are we looking at, like, if we say the experience level for the arborist, for example, is what, 5 years? How many years did it take that person likely to get the certification?
Okay, so currently, our arborist that we hired a few months ago, he has the 5 years of experience from previous employment, and he is in the process of getting all of the stuff together so that he can sit for his test. We give them a year from employment to sit for the test.
Okay.
So if he'd only had 4.5 years of experience, we'd still probably hired him knowing he would have enough time and enough time to test here. We could look at saying you could have 2 years, but they do have to have 5 years total to even sit for that test.
Right, okay. That's reasonable.
Taylor, go ahead.
Mayor?
Oh, no,
Mayor,
I'm sorry.
that's right, yeah.
Commissioner Saunders?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, we have lost 2 city managers in the past couple of years, and we were so fortunate that we had somebody, an assistant city manager, that could step up to the plate. We would have been up a creek without that. I'm wondering if jobs like the arborist or some of the mechanics, we should look into, consider having an assistant position so there would always be a person in waiting, so to speak. Whether they were as qualified, they could get qualified while they were in that position as an assistant. Is that something that you think that commissioners maybe should look in over the long run?
So there are some positions in the city that we do this. So like in wastewater, we know that our wastewater superintendent is retiring in July. We have an assistant wastewater superintendent, and over the last couple years, we have created a position. Really, we just rearranged wastewater, didn't bring in a new body or anything, but made a lead wastewater operator so that we have succession planning in, that's one of the examples. But some of the positions like the arborist, to have somebody just sitting there and waiting, that could be expensive because arborists are expensive. And I don't know that there would be enough work for them to do in that situation. As far as the mechanic goes, we do have 3 people in fleet services. We have 2 people right now, our manager and 1 mechanic. They are short-staffed right now, but they're operating, and we're not going to just hurry to fill that position. We want to make sure we get a good mechanic in there.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I had a question.
Commissioner Gossett and then Commissioner Good.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Just trying to take this a little bit, looking at, you mentioned that the top 4 positions, Mayor, are dictated by outside certificates or qualifications. The arborist and the building inspector, talking about qualifications, but also then the interpretation of our code. So I look back to this aspect of going back that we are approaching this, but code updates or code reinterpretations, is that the qualifications for the individual are one that could be, as Commissioner Thier had commented on, adjusted or looked at, but it's also that interpretation of the code. So the code is what, again, comes back up as problematic in the sense of interpretation and application, no matter the qualifications of the individual. So I really think that, the aspect that we have put in monies to redo the code or take a hard look at the code, this could impact the qualifications of both the arborist and building inspector and other positions throughout the city. So it is a multi-step position. You just, I don't think, start cutting 10% here or what have you for the individuals for their qualifications as opposed to the interpretation and application of a code. To me, that's what needs to be fixed first, and then backing into qualifications of those individuals. So I'm very pleased to see that the potential budget has inclusion of a reevaluation of the code, and keep moving it forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Good.
So, yeah, I was happy to see that the newly hired arborist is being allowed to obtain the requisite certification, after beginning the job. With the building inspector, 240 days, since we ended up promoting the assistant building inspector to the position, I'm not sure we want to worry about that having been open as long, listed. And there's a trend here. I mean, the difficult to fill positions, it's true nationally too. They tend to be, in our case, in the streets department. So that's why I think we need to, we're going to get to bonuses. Bonuses in the fairly generous percentages we are granting are appropriate for positions where it's difficult to recruit. But what's not appropriate, in addition to the fact that we will discuss later, we can't keep tacking them on to administrative personnel salaries, because we have this escalating, compounding situation here, which explains part of the run-up in the budget by 58% in the most recent 4 fiscal years. So, yeah, and given, as I pointed out earlier, we ignore the charter when convenient, I don't have a problem in hiring people who may lack some of the credentials but are on a track to obtain those credentials.
All right, thank you, Taylor.
All right, so moving on to our next slide. So I would like direction today, if you are prepared, on health insurance. So let me talk a little bit about how we're currently organized. We are on the state of Delaware plan, so that gives employees 2 options. They can go with the Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield and PPO, or they can go with an Aetna HMO plan. Currently, it is 90% for the employee and 80% for dependents. The proposal is 100% for the employee, 80% for dependents. That is a difference of about $111,000. The meeting this afternoon, you'll be considering approval of the police Teamsters collective bargaining agreement. That does include 100% for employee coverage, 80% for dependents for the police. I do believe even the person doing accounts payable for police who is not a police officer is just as valuable as the police officers because they need their tools to do their job. But again, we included the financial year 27 projection of these costs, and myself and Jean can answer any questions that you have, but it is still in this budget proposed to you today, and I'd like direction on if we should keep that there.
Commissioner Saunders?
A two-part question. Can you give us an idea, what is the average, what is the 10% equal to our average employee? I mean, how much are we asking them to pay in a premium as an average? I know everybody's a little different. And also, what deductibles on those programs do they have that they must pay? So I'm trying to get an idea of what our current employee is paying out of their pocket, so we know in dollars what sort of an effect it has on them.
I'm trying to pull up the actual.
Well, if you want to do it, then let us know this afternoon. I'm fine with that, great.
Well, let's pursue it
Mayor?
now. Let's pursue it now. Let's let Jean have time to answer that first.
Okay, thank you.
Let me have her answer that question first.
Well, I was going to ask while she's coming.
Take your time. There you go.
So right now, an employee per paycheck is paying if it's just an employee only plan, they're paying $58.19. Employee spouse, they're paying $183. Employee and child, they're paying $121, and family, they're paying $234 per check. So those would basically all be reduced about $58.
Per check? Is
Per
that
check.
A check per month?
And
I don't know.
26
How
I'm
much
sorry,
is
we
that
have
a month?
26 pay periods.
Bi-weekly.
Yeah,
Thank
bi-weekly.
you. That's what I wanted to know.
Yep. So the total employee cost for the year is $1,500 for an employee only. It's $4,700 for an employee and spouse. It's $3,100 for an employee and child, and it's $6,000 for a family plan.
Mayor, if I could
May
please.
have reversed the employee and spouse and the employee with like dependents, because
Commissioner Good, I'll give you the floor.
No, the employee and child is cheaper than employee and spouse.
All right, there's somebody down here, Commissioner Thier?
Yeah, so just for clarification, what is being proposed to change is just the employee from 90 to 100. Nothing else is changing. We're already 80% on dependents.
Correct. So
Okay.
if we did the 100%, then the employee-only plan, they wouldn't have to pay anything. And then basically you'd be taking off about $60 from all the rest of the plans per pay period. Because you'd be taking the employee portion out of it.
Yep. Just taking the employee portion
Yep.
out. So I think back to Mark's question is, it's about $1,500 an employee, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Good?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world where we didn't have fiscal constraints, this might be a good idea. But the problem is that in March of 2024, we just raised the city's coverage from 80 to 90%. And 90% is above the average for municipal employees across the country. I provided Mr. Tedder with Bureau of Labor Statistics data, which were a wide survey of municipal governments, and they're at 86%. So it's not a lot of money, but it doesn't seem like an appropriate time when we just went from 80 to 90% coverage for starting April 1st, 2024, to now, just because the police union, they have a separate negotiations with our city. That's a different hiring environment because of the challenges and dangers of the job. So I just think this is a situation where Mr. Tedder, advocating for all the city employees, doesn't seem to have any interest in protecting taxpayers from continuing to run up salaries in City Hall. And I'm disappointed in how it went down. And I do apologize. Yes, it turns out I thought you were talking about an employee plus a spouse plus children, which does cost more than just an employee and spouse. But it's not a huge amount of money. I think given this 3% cost of living adjustment, which we are giving to every employee, which, is does reflect, unfortunately, the sticky prices, the high inflation that the country is still experiencing, especially in a lot of services like roof repair and that sort of thing. I think this is just not the time to allow employees to have no payment whatsoever for their premiums. And this is a very good health insurance coverage. It's a nice package. Whatever the deductibles, co-pays, and co-insurances are, this is sort of like almost like a gold standard. I mean, Blue Cross Highmark is considered one of the more generous health insurance packages in the nation. So I wonder if anyone else would support a motion to keep ourselves where we went in March of 2024. That's just a year ago.
And Mayor, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish Commissioner Saunders' question. So our plan does have a $9,000 in-network out-of-pocket maximum. So what that means, you continue to pay your $20 deductible when you go to a primary care visit, $30 deductible for a specialist visit, $200 for the emergency room, which is pretty good. But you're also paying for, prescriptions, depending on the tier of that. But employees are paying something, but yes.
Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor? You cited the out-of-pocket $9,000 maximum. That's, considered catastrophic, like if you have major surgeries. But you didn't give us, I'm sure the deductible per employee and per dependent spouse is more like maybe, $300 annually? This is a normal health insurance policy.
So this plan, you continue paying until you reach the out-of-pocket max. So you don't hit a deductible. You keep paying that copay and all of that until you get to the out-of-pocket max.
Oh, so there is no calendar year deductible like that you have to, like we have to pay the first $300 of any expenses before we even benefit from our insurance carrier
so
kicking in.
you continue paying the copays. Yeah.
Right. So I think by citing the 9,000, I take issue with your citing that because that's the extreme case for people who end up, once you have more than 9,000 out of pocket, first of all, if it's more than 7.5% of your income, you can then deduct health, medical expenditures from your 1040. But, I think you're misrepresenting this plan. It's an excellent plan. The question is whether, to say that they then have to pay for prescriptions. We're in the United States of America. We're not in socialized medicine in Canada. Americans do have to use some of their salaries to pay for some of their health expenses. Like how in what world does a household not face any health care expenses? I think it's a bridge too far to go in 2024 from 80 to 90% and in 2025 from 90 to 100%.
Mayor?
Commissioner Saunders?
Am I correct, Gene, that it's $120 a month roughly for a single person? It's the same $120 for the guy that's in the back of the trash truck as it is for Mr. Miller here, right?
Correct.
It's the same $120.
Correct.
And there's no way to fix that, I guess. I mean, no offense, Mrs. Miller, but I think you can take the $120, but I sort of feel for the guy in the back of the trash truck that's making a third of that amount. There's no compromise there that we can come up with to adjust it so that those on the lower end benefit a little more than those on the upper end as far as the insurance premiums go?
We can be as creative as you guys want to.
I'll just throw that out there for my fellow commissioners to
Mr. Mayor,
consider.
I think it would violate ERISA
Commissioner
rules.
Good, I'm giving you the floor.
Thank you. I think it would violate ERISA rules. In fact, Mr. Tedder's contract may violate ERISA rules. I'm not spending the money because he got 90% coverage for himself, but instead of 80% coverage for his spouse, he negotiated 90% for his spouse. But that's why I'm advocating to make the merit bonuses be a larger percentage of salaries, 60,000 and under, because yes, Commissioner Saunders is absolutely correct. The health insurance ends up being a regressive part of people's salaries because lower paid employees. Is the 10%? I didn't think it was a full $120 bi-weekly for each.
No, it's $120 a month.
120 a month. So it's $60 per biweekly for just one employee. Okay, right. So $120 over a 4-week period. But, you know, I want to make up for that by giving larger bonuses, both in nominal terms and in a percentage of their salary to those making $60,000 and under. And we will compensate for that extra $120 per 2 pay periods, 4 weeks, that they now have to pay out of pocket, which they were paying out of pocket beginning in April 1st, 2024, when we raised it to 90%. When you don't have any skin in the game, you know, when you're not even paying 10% of your premiums, Mr. Tedder has assured me that there is careful investigation that if someone's spouse has health insurance, that they decline the city's policy. Because, yeah, this health insurance costs the city something like $15,000 per year for employees with no dependents, and almost $20,000 a year for employees with dependents. But the problem is, you know, there could be some oversights there where people, like, if they're paying 0% of the premiums, there's no reason for an employee ever to decline our coverage. Why would they?
So there is,
I do want to add that there is no issue offering different coverages to different types of employees. For instance, the police will have 100%. You can offer different employee groups, different employee classifications, different health insurance percentages. But I will say, I mean, for advertising sake of positions, it would be easier to have either do it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor, if I could, please.
Commissioner Thea?
Thank you. So one of the challenges I have is, and Commissioner Good has pointed this out, is, you know, this is a very generous plan, right? I mean, we're talking, you know, 20, 30, 100, right? So 20 to see a physician, 30 to see a specialist, 100 ER. 200 ER. I mean, mine is nowhere near that, right? I mean, it's probably double, right? It's probably 40, 60, 500, something like that. With mine, you don't even dare walk in an ER. You go to an urgent care unless, really, I mean, it's sad. You don't go to an ER unless you're like literally dying. So it is a very generous plan, and it's difficult for me to, particularly given, I think as Commissioner Good had pointed out, 80 to 90 last year. Now we go to 90 to 100. We are seeing expenses, continue to creep up. And one of the things I don't see, and, I'll get there, right? Maybe not in the next 2 weeks, but we've got to see expenses come down, okay? And, I finally feel like I've got a really good handle on what's in this budget. As we go forward, I'm going to look to see expenses come down. So philosophically, it's a tough one for me because the plan is so generous. Maybe the plan just needs to be less generous and less expensive to the city and everyone else, right? If you take a less generous plan, we can make it 100% and, it doesn't cost us anything. So I think, maybe, merit, right? I think there are just other options at this point. I'm having a really, really difficult time philosophically, supporting this.
Commissioner Markert?
I just had one question. Obviously, you have biweeklies, you have 26 pays a year, and the deductions that you mentioned hit all 26. There's no, the 2 months that you only have, would you get 3 pays? They were all hitting those 3 pays?
They're divided between all 26
Yeah,
pays.
okay. All right, just wanted to know.
Mayor,
Commissioner Gossett?
Again, it is a very tough decision in that regards in looking at this. But what is of concern to me also is looking at the difficult fill positions. If you're interviewing, and I look to you for direction on this, if you're interviewing a wastewater CDL or a mechanic, the question becomes, all right, we're paying you X number of dollars, just pick a number, $20 an hour, but also it's going to be $1,500 additional that you pay for medical expenses or your health insurance. Where competing communities, we're not national, we're competing with Lewis, with Dewey, with Millsboro, whomever. They're paying $21 an hour and no medical insurance coverage, it's zero. At a pay rate like that, that to me is non-competitive. We just are not being able to attract the people because we are not competitive in salary and compensation. So when you look at 300 and 500 days, 215 days, that's just a balance to me. The services that this community demands, their trash being picked up, their leaves being picked up, their sidewalks and streets being cleaned, the boardwalk being cleaned. I mean, the boardwalk is the major attraction for our residents and our guests that come here. We spend, we've got 80 seasonal workers for beach patrol. I just think balancing this out to have the services that are demanded here and are a level that, we can't go below because you can't go backwards. This to me is difficult, but those other considerations need to be brought into this equation of just hiring staff that is competent, that is committed, and we can retain and recruit qualified individuals to meet the standards that our, I'll be frank, entitled residents are demanding of. If you miss a trash collection by a day or a few hours, you hear about it. If the trash on the boardwalk is overflowing, we hear about it. So I just think about this in aspect of retention and recruiting of qualified employees that meet the standards of our taxpayers. Thank you.
Mayor,
Commissioner Saunders?
what happens when an individual becomes Medicare available or eligible? Does that change our insurance at any rate?
So because we're on the state plan, we have to follow their rules. So when somebody becomes Medicare eligible, they do have to sign up for A, but they can stay on our insurance, but they do have to be signed up for A, and then they can choose which way that they want to go.
And what do they generally do? Do they?
Stay on our insurance.
Of course.
Maybe that's something that we ought to look at.
Well, that's the state regulations.
That's
So
the
we can't change some of the stuff. And I just wanted to check the spousal coordination. That's also a state regulation. You cannot have a spouse on your insurance with the city or any state plan if their job offers insurance and pays at least 50% of the premium. So we don't have that many spouses on our insurance just because it is they have to coordinate that benefit every year with the state.
Commissioner Stranowski, did you?
Yeah, I wanted to just echo Commissioner Thier's comments. I think in the past couple years, we've made some incredibly generous efforts to be competitive, and we've increased salaries, we've added more positions to decrease the workload. We went from 80 to 90% for the medical coverage last year. So I struggle with this a little bit, but I also am looking at it from a recruiting standpoint as Commissioner Gossett. So I think I want to look at this as part of the budget big picture. So I don't want to make a decision just yet, but I'm sort of kind of leaning with having some hesitation at this point. And just for clarification, the current draft budget, has it included at 100% or still 90? Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Good?
Yeah, I mean, I respect what everyone is saying. I think that we need to, instead of deferring this again, I think Commissioner Saunders and I, who feel strongly that the lower paid employees, it was Ms. Lee who chose the 60,000 and below, but that looking at some of the salaries, that seems like a reasonable cutoff. We want to be more generous with the merit bonuses in terms of percentage of the salary. Although we also don't want them tacked on to salary. We don't want this compounding effect that someone who was thought that would somehow escape the notice of people setting salaries every year. So I think we can solve this problem by compensating these employees who are more difficult to recruit by the prospect of a fairly high year-end, in our case, I believe, end of March, early April bonus that will more than compensate for the additional, approximately $100 a month that they may be suffering in this 90, having to pay 10% of the health coverage. And again, I believe the fact that we're giving a 3% COLA, which is a little above what the BLS is recommending right now because inflation is tapering off, that will help these employees tremendously. 3% COLA, by the way, gets added on to salary, so that does enjoy this compounding effect. And I believe our salaries are competitive. I think some of the recruitment could be helped by this, the merit pay increase system changing effective April 1st, 2025. We have to get it done really soon.
Since health insurance and salary are somewhat intertwined here, do you want to go on to your next section, and then we'll continue this combined discussion? But Patrick?
Mayor, if I could, Gene, just, you are the hiring individual here. Just curious, your reaction to offering a potential employee a salary of X and a health insurance of 90% or 100%, if it's, let's say 100% at this point in time, or let me back up, 90%, but a potential bonus at the end of your work year or evaluation period. How does that, could you interpret how that would play with a potential employee versus saying, here's your salary and 100% health coverage?
If we tell them they have 100% health insurance, that's going to help in recruiting. I mean, that is a generous benefit, and I do recognize that that is a generous benefit. The bonus being based off merit and that is something that's kind of up in the air. So as a recruiting thing, because it's not like a actual recruiting bonus or something like that where you're going to get this amount of money. It could be anywhere between nothing to 3%. So giving them an actual dollar amount of what potential bonus, it could be misleading if you use that as a recruiting tool, because they may come in believing one thing and we get to there and it's not quite that a year later. I don't know that I would use that for a recruiting tool for the bonus. Now, once they're hired and we do a 6-month review, so that doesn't have any bonus attached to it anyways. And then they do the annual review. I would use it more at the 6-month review. You're doing a good job or whatever. And then, the potential of the merit raise. But right off the bat as a recruiting tool, I don't know how effective it would be.
Thank you.
Well, I can go ahead and go over the next slide, and then maybe we can see if you're ready to do anything related to this.
I think we need to make let's do that, and I think we need to make our best effort at trying to resolve this. No,
Sure.
You can go.
So one of the other
Thought we were gonna
deliverables.
combine, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
One of the other deliverables from our last meeting was to talk about salaries. So our median salary, excluding part-time, so this is just full-time employees, just under $57,000. So built into this budget, we do have a cost of living increase of 3% for next year. I did look up, so it's the Philadelphia, Delaware region inflation last year was 4.1%. The national average, I think it was 2.9. So we're looking at 3% cost of living increase. So what that costs the city for financial year 26, it's $186,000. And then we also provided the history of cost of living increases that the city's provided back through 2020. So 2%, 2%, 3%, 3%, 3%. So pretty in line with what we've done in the past. So the merit increase, I do think doing this as a bonus is a good idea because it is not compounding over time, and employees would get that money up front. So my plan, if you do decide to move forward with the merit increase bonus, that would be paid out at the start of the fiscal year, April 1st, to every employee based on their performance review, which we just completed all of the performance reviews, or nearly all of them, and they will be done by April 1st. So our average this year for financial year 26, these new reviews that we just did, is 1.7%. So that's the cost you're looking at for a one-time bonus. So some people walking on water perhaps got a 3%. People who are doing above and beyond get around 2. People that are doing just fine get 1. And then, of course, people with substandard performance don't get anything. So we did completely revamp our evaluation system this year. Previously, it was a 1 to 3 score, so it was terrible, good, or absolutely amazing. Now it's 1 through 5. And we also redesigned the evaluations. So there's several. How many areas of competencies are there?
So there's 10 areas on each evaluation, but we have 4 different evaluation types now.
And so we have redesigned them. There's the 4 different types, so it corresponds to the type of role that the individual has. So they're much more, I think, precise and helpful. But yes, so ultimately, I would like to see if the commissioners are in favor of continuing forward with this as a one-time bonus instead of adding it as had been done previously to the salary.
Commissioner Saunders?
Thank you. Thank you, Taylor. Do I understand that the $22,000 is the entire cost, equalizing 1% to the people earning $60,000? That's what the $22,000 represents?
That's an option, and it would be $22,000 to add a percent to those
So
under
2%
60.
would be double that, 3% would be 3 times that. You're not suggesting 1%, you're just giving us a sample.
We are suggesting an extra 1% for those under 60,000. So that would be if someone got a 3%, they'd get 4.
Right.
If they got 0, they'd get 1. If they got 1, they'd get 2.
$600 for a person earning $60,000. Doesn't sound like much, that's all I'm saying.
Mr. Mayor?
It could be 2% for double up, we'd still only be in another $22,000. Right? It doesn't cost us much to be generous.
Commissioner Good?
Yes, I'm really elated to see this. I think having those earning 60,000 or below be eligible for up to 4% rather than 3% is a great idea. It will in part solve this. I believe, it will make a difference to retain employees. Ms. Lee has pointed out, yeah, maybe in hiring, people would rather see a larger paycheck immediately from health insurance as opposed to being told a year from now they're getting this bonus. However, at the same time, we're increasing the merit by 1 percentage point up to a maximum of 4% rather than 3%. I would like to reduce the percentage. Anyone earning over $200,000 in this town, which would include you, Mr. Tedder, and may soon, we are going to be having difficulty recruiting an in-house counsel and a new finance chief when Mr. Dukes has indicated he's retiring. I would like to cap the merit increase to 1% for anyone earning $200,000 or more. Do I have any support for that?
I do want to add, I'm not eligible for this merit increase. The commissioners handle that separately.
Yes, you're sort of, you're not explaining the whole picture. Because you arrived on May 15th of 2024, your particular merit increase will be decided by this commission later than April 1st, 2025. So when the other employees will receive their bonuses. But the problem is, there will be a point where you are eligible for a merit increase. Would you confirm that? Maybe like 6 weeks or 8 weeks after the other employees receive theirs.
It would be based on the performance review done by you all.
Exactly, and I feel strongly that in exchange for allowing those earning 60,000 or under to have this extra 1%, which will help them defray potentially the 10 percentage points of health insurance that they've had to pay, the last year, and it was 20% because the year before, because we only covered 80%. I would like to cap merit pay increases for those earning $200,000 or more. We don't have a lot of individuals like that, but for better or worse, now that people applying here see what the package, including a home loan that the city manager received, it will become almost a given that an in-house counsel and a finance chief will start to demand these stratospheric compensation packages. So I would like to cap merit increases for those earning $200,000 or more in this city to 1%, because that person's getting a 3% cost of living adjustment. It's not like we're depriving these people of salary increases, because the cost of living adjustment alone is pretty, will take care of that person, how that person is affected by inflation. So we're spending more money by going up to 4% for those earning 60,000 or less. I want to see us spend a maximum of 1% on merit increases for those making 200,000 or more.
I'd like to pause a minute and go to the members of the public. Is there anybody that from the public that would like to speak? Anybody? Carolyn? Tap and make sure that microphone's on.
It is.
Yeah.
Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident. I just want to mention a couple things. I do think you should take into account the surrounding area and what they're offering. But I personally like the idea of a different structure for lower earning employees versus higher earning employees when it comes to health insurance. I came from a company that worked that way. I don't remember what the base was, but the lower level hourly employees got much more generous premium structure. I came from healthcare and nobody got 100% coverage, but they paid significantly less. So I could get behind 100% coverage for the lower earners. I even came from a place where the higher level were forced to go with a high deductible plan, which was much more expensive. But I'm not suggesting that, but I am suggesting that it might be beneficial to look at 100% coverage for employees below, and maybe 60,000 is the number. The other thing that I would say is I like the idea of a bonus rather than making it a merit increase on their base pay, because there isn't the compounding. Bonuses aren't guaranteed. They should be based on performance. And it's also nice for lower level employees to get, if they're only going to get $600, to get it all at once, because $600 spread over 26 is somewhere a little bit more than $2 or something. It's not a lot of money. So giving it to them at once actually makes it feel like it's more. But thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Walter? Jay? Thank you. Anybody up here? Perhaps we should take a minute and those interested draft a potential motion for the employee health insurance coverage as well as the salary. Maybe we could combine them together possibly, or at least bring up a formula and let's discuss it.
Mayor, would you
Commissioner
have
Saunders?
a third component in that being the 2% increase that we had talked about for lower income employees?
Would it?
I mean, that would make it a three-prong, or we do them all three separately, whatever.
I'm trying to get 2 or 3 bullets for
Right, I understand.
what would comprise a motion.
I could make a motion now.
Well, let's start off with giving us the components of that motion, Suzanne.
Okay.
so that we can,
You know, and I've studied this and I've looked at national trends. Yes, we're all aware that the recruiting environment is competitive, and that's why we want to help in the recruiting, as all of you should have probably saw on Mr. Tedder's one of the slides. We're having the worst problem recruiting those making 60,000 or less. A lot of the employees under Mr. Matlos, you know, we are competing locally and regionally, like in Sussex County, maybe even Kent County and well, Delmarva. So my motion would comprise the following. We will, as a compromise, though, since you're saying it doesn't violate ERISA rules since we have the police at 100%, I'm concerned that may not be true, but let's hope it is true. Those earning 60,000 or more, both, you know, and when we're recruiting them, they will know this, we will give them 100% health insurance. Those earning over 60,000 will remain at the generous 90% level that we adopted a year ago. At the same time, for the bonuses, which right now run from 0% to 3% for everyone, instead, those bonuses, those earning 60,000 or less will be eligible up to through 4% of their salaries. Those earning 60,000 or more will be eligible up to 3% with an exception. Those earning 200,000 or more, the merit bonus will be capped at 1%. That's, I feel, is a compromise, but anyone, we'll see how it goes.
but I would,
My concern there with I agree with everything that Suzanne said up to the end, but the end, having one category with one or two people in it doesn't seem fair, or I'm not even sure if that's legal, to just make a certain category to put one individual in.
Well, it's an income class, which I fear we'll have a few more of.
We only have one employee.
That's-
that
I know,
is
I'm
that's my
aware of
point.
that.
200,000.
I'm aware of that.
That's my point. We're picking on somebody.
But we only have one employee whose house was purchased with city
We don't
funds.
need to get in that.
So, you know, separate category.
we only have one employee, and remember that has to come in front of the commissioners, so it seems to me that could be resolved at that time. Suzanne, I'd like you to restate your motion one more time, a little slower, without the adjectives.
Without the commentary, no problem.
Wait a minute.
May I ask just a question? Just looking at application practicality, is the division a dollar amount or hourly versus salaried a better administration of the potential?
So all full-time employees, we annualize their salary amount when we're figuring out what, you know, the hiring and all that stuff. So it would be based off your base pay amount. It wouldn't include overtime or something like that because we never know what it's going to be for the next year. But off your base salary annualized, I would do the 60,000.
And I'm just looking at median salary is 56.9. So any break in your mind of how many would fall below 50 and above 60, or? I'm just curious as to how much we're really impacting here.
You're impacting about half the city.
Half the city, okay.
Right, so to.
Suzanne, can you
recap, Mr.
restate the
Mayor?
motion without
Yep,
the commentary? And what I'd like you to do is just, let's bullet each component there. Start off with 60,000 or less.
So I am proposing a motion that those earning 60,000 or less receive 100% health insurance premium coverage. I believe that will remain at 80% for dependents. We've never discussed anything else. At the same time, in terms of these year-end or fiscal year-end bonuses, which will not be added to salary going forward to avoid compounding, Those who earn 60,000 or less will be eligible, depending on their performance, for between 0% for a failing performance, up to 4% one-time bonus annually. And those earning 60,000 and above will remain at the current potential bonus of between 0 and 3%, but not tacked onto salary. And anyone in the city, because there will be more people in this category for better or worse, because of the recruiting environment which was created in April of 2024, anyone earning $200,000 or more can receive a maximum of 1% of his or her salary in bonus, in this merit increase bonus. And I feel we are generous, and if you look at the COLA each year, and if you look at just the health insurance compared to the national average, we are trying to be as generous as we can.
So I still don't have it down pat, but Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to just ask a couple questions. So you're assuming for budget calculations,
Do you want me to go back to the health insurance slide?
no.
Okay.
I'm on the merit bonus right now. How are you coming up with the 113 plus the 22,000?
So the 113 is based on our evaluations, which are pretty much done. That is what the number will be for the merits,
Okay, so that's using the 1.7%.
the average. I've actually calculated it out per employee, and that
Okay.
is the number.
Okay. And I think some of the recommendations, like the increase in the health insurance, came from the employee personnel committee, right? Was this one-time bonus versus salary increase discussed at all with that group?
We have not had an employee committee meeting in the last few weeks, so this is something that just came up in the last week, doing it a bonus instead of a.
Have you received feedback from employees about this?
I have not, but
I mean, I don't think people understand that this is a huge change in the culture and the expectation here. I mean, it's a pretty big change. So to your knowledge, there hasn't been any feedback from employees on that concept? Okay. And then in the past, people would get a merit increase, but also, although we don't have a formal bonus program, money was found in other places to give people bonuses. How has that worked in the past?
So I've been doing payroll now for almost 4 years, and I can tell you that during that 4 years, we do have some formal bonuses, and no other bonus money has been given out. Our formal bonuses that we have are in streets department. Part-time and seasonal employees get $1 an hour they worked through the summer as a bonus at the end of the summer. That's to retain them and to get them to work as many hours as possible. In the streets department, we also have a handful of employees that have to work 7 days a week through the summer. We give them a small bonus because that's not necessarily favorable. And then our seasonal police and our seasonal beach patrol this last year got bonuses both as a hiring and for longevity for staying. And our parking department got a hiring bonus for seasonals. But really, the only full-time employees that got it were the ones that had to work 7 days a week in the streets department.
Okay. Are you done? I'm sorry. Are you finished?
Yeah, I'm done.
Commissioner.
I processed that.
I'm not sure who said. Commissioner Gossett. Thank you. So a couple of clarifying questions. The median salary includes police or does not include police?
None of this information includes police because they're on a completely different pay scale type.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to confirm.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mayor, or Assistant Mayor, Race Mayor. I just want to say that we have a proposal on the table at the moment, and I support part 1 and 2, but I still can't swallow point 3 of taking one individual, despite who it may be, and putting them in a separate category all by themselves, particularly when we're going to be recruiting for others in that category. And how are we going to sit down with the new attorney or whoever and say, oh, by the way, you're restricted. You're the lowest bonus person percentage-wise in the city. I just don't think our part 3 of that proposal is going to work.
Yeah, I don't think anyone up here besides Suzanne is going to support that, so.
But I hate losing 1 and 2.
1% of $200,000, 1% of $200,000 is a significant amount of money.
I'm just saying, if you take the third part off, I think you'd have a win.
Suzanne?
Well, I'm sorry, what I would like to do, and I suggest, I'm sorry I missed some of that conversation, is basically I have, I think, 4 bullets here. And the one about the 200K or more, I'm suggesting would be an independent motion, so we can vote on that. Patrick, do you have?
I do, but I have a question, if I may,
Yeah.
Mayor. What Commissioner Chernowski brought up with regards to the employee reaction to this, that it is completely new approach. I'm okay with points 1 of the health insurance, 100% and 90% creating that. But the one-time bonus, to me, as you've mentioned, is a complete change. And we have just begun the new evaluation process from going from 1 to 3 to 1 to 5. And we have no real reaction to that yet, or do we, with regards to the acceptance or comments or what have you with regards to the new evaluation system?
The new evaluation system has gone over well. It's a much beefier system, and I know that the managers that I've heard from like it because they can get a better evaluation of their employees. And another part of it is goals, so there's department heads setting goals for their departments and things like that, all kind of tied to these evaluations. Changing from an increase to a bonus is probably the biggest change in this whole part of it. And it does affect them eventually down the road. They wouldn't notice the difference this year because it's the same, but add it 5 years from now, that's when they'll really notice the difference between it having been a bonus and having been accumulated.
If I may, I mean, the other difference.
Commissioner Skanowski, go ahead.
The other difference with that is, you know, we'd be paying out a lump sum amount once a year rather than accruing it over the entire year. And then you've got people that are probably looking for another job that are going to stay until they get that bonus, and then they're going to submit their resignation. I mean, there's pros and cons to both approaches for sure. And the other thing that I fear is if we're not giving our top performers a merit increase, or just anyone a merit increase, and then 3 years from now, when we do a market analysis again, then we're playing catch up then to bring people up to where they should have been now, or a year from now or 2 years from now. So I think there's value in both ways. I think my concern right now is more of the reaction and just the fairness aspect from people. You've got a top performer that is only getting a pay increase the same rate that a non-performer is getting just because it's the cost of living. And while they, may get a cash bonus, but it's, when you go, I feel like most people want the salary increase, and, when you get a bonus, they don't always count it for loans or getting a new car. They want to see your pay stub and what your salary is. So I can kind of go either way on this one, but I think I'm leaning more towards the city manager and managers having the discretion to increase one's salary.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Good?
So we just clarify, it seems Commissioner Gossett and Commissioner Chernowski, unlike Commissioner Saunders and myself, want to continue with this system which, like COLA compounds salaries, but this also compounds salaries, and it's not the norm in most private sector and government employers. And it's going to continue to escalate salaries in City Hall way above the inflation rate. There's a reason we've gone from there are many reasons we've gone from 27.7 million to 43.8 million in just 4 fiscal years. So I know that you're saying, yeah, for an employee, because if you tack it onto salary, that employee has a higher salary, they can show it to potentially other jobs for which they're applying. That's a bad thing, actually. It means they might feel they have more leverage in trying to get jobs out, and we want to retain them. So I'm hoping we can get beyond. I believe Mr. Christian implemented this system, which is an outlier. It's just not the norm across the country. There's a reason year-end bonuses, unlike COLA, are not added to salary, because otherwise you institutionalize extremely high annual run-ups in salary, which is what we would do if we go with this, I think, anachronistic system. Actually, not really, it's just not the norm.
Mayor?
I would say, are there some of us that would like to defer on this and hear what the employee committee comes back with, or?
Mayor?
No, Commissioner Gossett?
Lost my train of thought here for a moment. Go ahead with Mr. Saunders.
Would another option be to vote on, would another option to be to vote on these individually rather than trying to put them together? Would that make more sense? Yeah. Because we have various opinions where somebody likes A and doesn't like B and doesn't like C.
3 different motions, I think.
Right.
But I remember my
Mr.
question.
Gossett, go ahead.
Have it, with regards to the COLA increase, isn't this been the practice for almost ever in regards to the city?
Just the COLA?
Well, a merit increase.
So we didn't formally have merit increases before the last 3 years. However, we did give high-performing employees, it was at the discretion of the city manager.
Right.
So the past city manager would pick certain employees and give them 7%, 8%, what they felt appropriate. We just didn't have a formal way of doing merit raises. All we've done with the merit raises is make it a formal program, so nobody's getting a huge amount while others may not be noticed and get nothing.
But
Commissioner Chernowski?
but the COLA increases across the board, right? There is absolutely no discretion. at all.
Everyone gets COLA.
But and that may not have been. Has that always been the case?
No. In years past, they would adjust the COLA.
Right. It was salary increases was just lumped up into one group.
It was a spreadsheet, go down it, this person gets 8, this person gets 3, this person gets 2. There was no formal anything to how the salaries were increased.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Good?
I mean, I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel here. Like, I believe Social Security the COLA does have this compounding effect, but that reflects reality with the price of milk and everything else. So I don't know why we're now, I mean, this to me, we're almost running the clock, and we're never gonna get this budget done on March 21st. The COLA will be compounding. That's reality. So I don't think we want to now worry about whether that's good or bad. It's sort of basic. So it's going to be, every employee will get, which I absolutely support. 3% COLA is sort of a reasonable number given the inflationary climate in this country right now. So it's just whether the merit increases. Unlike most employers across the country who do not want to tack it on to salary because of this escalating compounding effect, whether we So COLA, I'm not even sure, we don't have to spend time on COLA, do we? Is anyone against the 3% COLA? I'm not hearing that. So in theory, someone who got 3% COLA will also get 3 and potentially 4% merit increase, with the exception, I believe, is the right thing to do, those earning, a stratospheric salary. But so, we could live with the compounding COLA phenomenon. We just have to decide on the merit increase, which system we're going to go with. And I believe that Mr. Christian created a flawed system which will continually escalate administration, especially administration salaries, because they tend to be higher than the streets department when these merit increases are tacked on to salaries in excess of, say, well, $100,000, let's say. So, I mean, the COLA, I'm not, are we even, could we vote on COLA right now? I make a motion?
You already made a motion.
Well, my motion, I think, is being knocked down, especially that last clause, but let's do a simple motion. We will, for fiscal year 2026, use a cost of living adjustment of 3%, which applies to every city employee.
Second.
Except the board, of course.
We have,
You already have a motion on the floor with the previous one.
I'll have to withdraw your
Nothing has
first
been
motion.
done about it.
I intentionally tried to not ask for a motion and instead have just bulleted remarks.
I didn't think it was a motion, but just for the sake of being safe, will you withdraw a motion if one was made?
Well,
previously?
I could withdraw it right now, but I could bring 2 of the 3 components of it back in 5 minutes. But yeah, I want to just deal with COLA because we're never getting enough accomplished to get this budget put to rest by March 21st.
We're not getting anything accomplished because you keep repeating the same thing, and you cannot let certain things go, like Mr. Tedder and a salary and a housing allowance. And when you repeat it 20 times during a meeting, we're not getting anything else accomplished.
All right, going forward, let's do
All
the
right.
3% COLA.
Let's do this. Please withdraw any motions that have been made to this point, if they've been made. And let's start over with a clean slate. Are you agreeable to that, Commissioner Good?
Yes, I
Okay.
withdraw my initial motion and I will modify it to be I make a motion to adopt a 3% cost of living adjustment for fiscal year 2026 for all employees' salaries.
Second.
And so we've got a motion by Commissioner Suzanne Good and a second by Commissioner Patrick Gossett to offer employees a 3% cost of living COLA increase.
Mayor, quick question if I could. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just clarification, we're saying all employees, but we're excluding the police, right?
The police
excluding, I'm sorry,
employees.
The police.
Including the police.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Covered under
Yeah,
the collective
police,
bargaining
both health
agreement.
insurance and salaries, that's the police union. This is not in play right now, right? The police salaries and health insurance.
All non-union employees would,
So help me again. Let you modify that motion so that it's accurate
it's a 3% cost of living adjustment for all non-union employees.
for all non-union employees.
Right,
Are
so
you- are
I
you
make a
okay with that
motion.
amendment?
Okay, I make a motion
You're
for a
okay.
3% cost of living adjustment in Rehoboth Beach for all non-union employees.
Second.
That's an amendment to it, and the second, the amendment is seconded. Is there any further additional discussion? Anybody, members of the public? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And the motion's carried. So let's look at the other motions, or what can become motions. Again, I want to review the content of what the motions might be. We've got in front of us 60,000, or for those employees making 60,000 or less, receive 100% health and coverage, insurance coverage. Also for employees making 60,000 or less, They are eligible to receive a one-time bonus annually for up to 4% depending upon performance evaluation. Is that language correct?
Yes, that, the one-time bonus reflects the fact that it will not be added to their current base salary, but rather will be a separate payment. It is subject to federal and state income taxes, but it will stop this salary inclusion. Yes, that's fair enough, and that will be up to 4% for those earning 60,000 or below. But it
Okay,
will
so
be,
now I've got a third bullet that for those making 60,000 or more, they would be eligible for up to 3% annual bonus, but not tacked on to the salary. Is that correct wording?
that is correct, but I do, and then the next bullet would be, which I think is the right thing to do, given everything that's gone down, that those, and in terms of recruiting in the future, a 1% bonus is sufficient to recruit someone in this area earning 200,000 or more. That merit increase will be limited to 1%, because if you give a person earning over 200,000 or more,
Mayor?
both a 3% merit increase and a 3% cost of living adjustment,
We've
that
got
alone is a
heard this.
$15,000
Dan,
extra
we
payment.
have a motion on the floor.
No, I don't believe a motion in, and if I may,
Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have a motion on the floor yet.
if I may ask for that motion to be, or the potential motion to be broken into three separate, one on the health insurance, one on the merit or the bonus, and one on the cap on the 200% or 200K. max
Okay,
at
well, let's
1%.
start with the 200K. Can you help distill it into what, Suzanne can make the motion, but can you help distill it into what the wording should be?
Can we all just agree that we're not going to support that and move on?
Well,
Like,
let's
why-
take it to a vote. I make a motion, given that higher salaried individuals are not in as much need financially of large merit increases, that anyone of any non-union employee in Rehoboth Beach be limited to a 1% one-time bonus this year and going forward.
We have a
Mayor, ask for
motion.
second.
Is there a second?
Great, let's move on.
All right, so that fails for not a second. Do you want to make a motion for just those making
Yeah,
applicable to those making 60,000 or less? Let me ask Gene, though, is
health
there
and-
any clarification that needs to be on there? For instance, like we did for all non-union employees?
Should all include non-union. The union has its completely own set of pay scales and everything.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may, the
Commissioner Gossett.
clarification on this, again, my request is that this motion be broken into one motion on health insurance and then a separate motion regarding the one-time bonus.
That's what I plan to do, actually.
Good, thank
So
you.
I make a motion that those earning 60,000 or less be given 100% health insurance coverage by the city. Those making over 60,000 annually continue in the 90% coverage by the city.
Will you seconded by Mark. Can you clarify that this is for the employee portion only?
Yes, it's in other words, when it's 90%, the employee pays 10%. And when it's 100% for those earning 60,000 or less, the employee pays 0%. We're not talking about co-pays and other, expenses they'll have to cover when they go to seek medical care. Right, so it's pretty, the motion is that those earning 60,000 or under will be bumped now from the city covering the current 90% of their health insurance to 100%. These are not all the non-union employees. Likewise, the non-union employees earning over $60,000 will remain at the city covering 90% of their health insurance, premiums, and they will have deducted from their pay the 10% of those health insurance premiums in their biweekly paychecks.
I'd like to do something, I guess, a little unusual, but the motion from Suzanne is fine. I think it's a little expansive, hard to understand. I would like Jean and maybe you to take a minute and to rewrite that motion into the exact wording that we need, because it's very important we get it right this time. Would you mind taking a couple minutes and doing that?
Could I just ask a question before we do that? And Jean, you feel that this is something that just came out of nowhere. You feel comfortable with the salary being above or below is legal, is
So with the health
allowed
insurance
even
stuff,
under?
I'd kind of like us to hold off. With the merit bonuses, it doesn't make a difference. With the health insurance, it would be nice to not make a motion today and let us look at the 60,000.
Yeah.
How does that affect the numbers and all of that? Let us come back with on the next meeting. I know I don't want to push off health insurance. However, I could have better information next meeting with this and the divide and how it affects at 60,000 than if we just jump into this today.
I know that you can have different categories that have different benefits, but it's always been position-based or pay group classification-based, in my experience.
Which we can get much better information for you. And then we can also look at the hard to fills with the 100%. If we're not going to do it for everybody, it would be beneficial to push it off just one meeting so we can make a good motion on very specific who is what at the next meeting.
I'm amenable with that if there's no objection, but I would like Commissioner Good to write out your potential motion so that we can see exactly what is on your mind. And then that can be translated into your language and shared with the Commissioner Markert.
I just wanted to add, I mean, my belief here is we're kind of speaking arbitrarily with drawing a line in the sand or whatever, at 60, where if you're on the cusp below and above, it kicks some people up and down. And I think that may be not what we intended. I think we sort of have in our mind what we're intending to do here, but I agree. I think it's important that we get the detail.
Yeah, if I were an employee and I got that raise that bumped me to $60,003, I'd ask you to take it away from me.
That's why, in my experience, it's always been like position-based. Anyone at the director level or above, et cetera.
Yeah, Mayor, if I may.
So we can give that more thought.
Also
Commissioner
look at
Gossett?
that perhaps look at the pay grades that we have established. I don't know if that is an effective division or not, but again, consideration.
I
in that
definitely think for the health insurance, we could come back with
pay grade.
position, pay grade based, this is what you're getting.
But I think in concept, we're all sort of in agreement with that strategy.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm worried, my original idea was not to bump the health insurance from 90% for any non-union employees, but just to help compensate those earning 60,000 or more. Or maybe you'll come up with a different system for that with the 4% potential merit. I would like when you do your research on this, I am concerned that we violate ERISA rules set by the Department of Labor by having these different categories of employees enjoying better health insurance coverage. So if you could make sure, we play loosey-goosey sometimes, it seems, with the charter. I don't want to violate Department of Labor laws. And the only reason I gave up, I tried to compromise on doing the health insurance more generously for the higher paid employees, for the lower paid employees, was to get to yes here, and because everyone here seemed to be almost jumping on the 100% for everybody.
Okay, we've got a path forward. Everybody okay with it? And Suzanne, if you would get something to Jean as early as tomorrow, that'd be all right, because our next budget meeting is coming up quickly. Did you have any final word you wanted to make on this subject?
So you did not make a motion on the merit increases?
I suggest that we bring it all back as one package.
Well,
with separate motions.
Mr. Mayor, we're tabling or delaying the health insurance, whether we want to make the distinction, between it's at the 60,000 threshold. Why can't we figure out these merit pay, whether 60,000 and below are eligible up to 4%, and the others will remain at the up to 3%, which has been the norm here? Why can't we deal with that now? I recognize that no one else is on board for the very highest paid employees, which is not a bad idea, and it's many employers because it's more progressive. They would give higher merit increases to lower paid employees and give lower merit increase percentages to the highest paid employees.
Thank you, Suzanne.
So we don't want to
The
deal
only
with
thing that
merit
I would
increases
ask
now?
is,
Commissioner Gossett?
the only thing that I would ask is that for consistency in this application, that if we have two different standards for potential bonuses versus healthcare, I believe it would be much easier to administer if all of it is consistently applied. So the 60,000 to me is a grabbed out of the air, as opposed to applying it to actually what is in place with our pay grades and what has been established. So I would ask that come back with an application that is consistent in both for the health insurance and also the potential of the one-time bonus. Thank you.
With that, we are moving out of this.
Mr. Mayor, just
With
one
that, we are
quick
moving
point.
out of this topic.
I understand.
So
but
that we can
gotta,
rest
I
on
don't
it,
think it's
think on it.
arbitrary when the median
You
salary
obviously
is
don't understand,
56,000. So
Suzanne.
let's at least,
So
no,
let's
I
move
hope-
on, please.
I hope people, there's,
Suzanne, we're done with this topic. We'll be fresh and resolve it all at the next meeting. Taylor, thank you.
Okay, so
Next topic.
the purpose of this meeting, the enterprise fund. So we are going to start with water operations, and I am going to have Evan Miller, our assistant city manager, handle water and wastewater. Go ahead and take it away, Evan.
What is your topic, Walter?
Well, I didn't want to interrupt the health. I only have one question.
Come up to the microphone. That's all right. I didn't mean to skip over you, but for the commissioners, it's not reopening
Well,
this topic, please.
First of all, you're all doing fine. They're nice graphics, and there's a logical way that you're going through it, and I appreciate that. So I'll yield my question, I'll leave it, and I don't need an answer on it right now. You're about to jump into water, wastewater, et cetera, and I'd like an idea that we seem to be using Mr. Caswell and/or the new company so much more these days, and in that conversation, whoever can answer it, why are we not doing water and sewer taps ourselves? And I'll let you progress in that, maybe we can get an answer. Thank you.
All right, we would address that at some point. Thank you, Walter. All right, Evan, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. I'm also going to ask Henry Matlos, the Director of Public Works, to join us up front to help answer any questions you might have. So the FY26 water operations highlights, we wanted to call out some of the largest accounts and go through those with you. So first, chemicals, 95,000. That's obviously for any chemicals that we need to treat the water that we then disperse through the water distribution system. In engineering, this accounts for water meter replacements, an allocation monitoring program, the continuation of well 6, hydrant flushing, and then the Tidewater interconnect. We call out PFAS treatment because PFAS treatment is not budgeted under engineering. It's actually under CIP because that relates to a larger capital project that will span over multiple years. We have 110,000 in for electric. That's obviously for not only the water department, that facility, but our other water facilities, our wells. General maintenance, 250. I will have Henry touch on that account. Maintenance contracts, this is primarily for our water tower maintenance, so I believe it's annually or every other year we do perform maintenance at the water towers, mainly power washing, so cleaning and then painting if it's necessary. Also in maintenance contracts is the AMI meter project, so this is the automated meter reading project that we continue to work on. And then in maintenance contracts, various tree trimming and fence maintenance at our various well facilities. Utility patching is also included in there. You see a couple photos that we've included. So anytime that we need to perform a street cut to access the water system, we need to repair the cut that we make into the street. So we have $100,000 in for utility patching. And then annually, we do purchase new water meters and either repair those or replace those, and we have $85,000 budgeted. We can take any questions you might have on water.
Mayor, if I could, please.
There.
Thank you. So, capital, I figured we'd cover all this at once if we could, please. So, the PFAS expenditures in the capital budget, which are going to be 500 next year, and just give me a second here.
3 million.
500, 3,500,000. So, if I recall correctly from our from the PFAS presentation a few months back, we're not going to have the results from our charcoal test or carbon test until sometime in the spring, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so that was one. So we wouldn't move forward with any purchase until we have our results, correct?
Well, the results will only be for Lynch well. That's the only well that is treated, that has the carbon filtration. Well 7 and well 8 are not treated for PFAS, and that will be the crux of the PFAS remediation.
Okay. If I recall, and again, it's been a bit, and I may have the wrong agency if it still exists. The FDA or someone, have they, handed down, so to speak, or provided guidance on how they want us to remove PFAS? Is it the process that we're currently testing at Lynch? In other words, I don't want to invest in something that they're going to come back a couple of years from now and say, you can't use that process, you got to use a different process.
Sure, understand. Mm-hmm. The granulated active carbon and ion exchange are the two main methods in which it's used. We have granulated carbon, activated carbon in Lynch wells. We have 4 tanks there, and that is what the water department changed out just last month. And I'd mentioned that Newark was one of the first municipalities in the country to really go after their PFAS. And they are using a combination of the granulated carbon and ion exchange. We just had Pannoni doing, they're basically doing an initial analysis of our entire system, the hydraulics of it and the electrical, and we'll see which way is best. But we will do a method in which we'd have the ability to eventually do both.
Okay. And just bear with me for a second. So we've got activated carbon?
Yes.
And ionization?
Ion exchange, yes.
Ion exchange, excuse me. Right now, we're just doing the activated carbon.
That's correct.
Okay. This is an either or. We could do one or the other. But I think you're proposing that we're going to be able to do both.
Well, it's an either or both. I'm sure we're going to continue with the activated carbon. There's a chance we could go to the ion exchange. Newark is doing both right now. But the activated carbon, it's less expensive for initial costs, significantly less expensive. And it's again, we also do that now. We'll also have to see our PFAS levels, and it could eventually be a combination of both. Frankly, we may not know that answer for 2 years. What's best?
And when you say we may not, because of our testing or because what we hear from someone else?
From our testing, from the design, of the plan, of the plan itself, because again, we're going to have to put this in two separate locations, PFAS remediation, both at well 7 and well 8.
Okay. So I think you know where I'm going, right? I mean, this is a substantial expense. It's not like we're going to spend 20 grand. We're going to spend, close to 5 million. What guarantees do I have that we're not spending 5 million and then, we'll come back 3 years from now, we're going to have to spend another 5 million?
Well, that's my job to make sure I give you, I do the research, do the analysis, if necessary, hire other experts in the field to get their opinion, in addition to, discuss with other municipalities like Newark to make sure we make the right decision.
And I trust that you'll do that.
Yeah.
My concern is that we've got two potential options here, and maybe doing both. To me, if activated carbon is going to work, I don't understand why we would want to do both.
If activated carbon will work based on our numbers and our flows, I would agree with you on that.
Okay.
That we'd rather stick with activated carbon.
Okay. So what are the, are there checkpoints along, right, where we're talking about 500,000 for next year, 3 million the year after? Are there checkpoints along the way? Obviously there's the budget checkpoint, but let's put that aside. Are there checkpoints along the way where we're going to know, okay, this activated carbon is the way that we're going to go?
Well, during the next year, it'll take about, once it's approved, it'll take about 400 days to come up with a design, get everything approved and put it out, get the required permits, and eventually put it out to bid. That's in the engineering cost for next year, which I believe was $150,000. The $500,000 was to buy tanks,
Yep.
which we know we're going to need. And we're trying to get ahead of the game because we know this is coming and this is required to be implemented by April of 2029, where it will be an MCL, a max contaminant level of 4.0 parts per trillion. So we want to buy the tanks now, and I would imagine, I said 2 years, actually probably at the end of that 400 days, I think we will know what is the best solution, whether it would be the GAC or the ion exchange. And I will definitely update the commissioners as we proceed.
Okay, so as far as the tanks, you need those tanks regardless of whether it's carbon or ion exchange?
That's correct. The same tanks.
Same tanks regardless. Okay. What's the earliest that you would actually install the tanks? Would it be after these 400 days?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because what we would do, we'd have to, this is obviously something that we would put out work with Pannoni and put it out to bid. And they would be the ones putting together the bid package for it.
Okay.
And then it actually would potentially be a fair amount after the 400 days. If all goes totally to plan, we'd be looking at toward the end of 2027, mid to the end of 2027, having this online.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So knowing how we're going to filter would actually be one of the latter items which we would decide.
So as far as like the tanks, so it sounds like the earliest that they would get installed is 400 days from now.
More than that.
Okay. What was your thinking? I understand that you're saying you wanted to get ahead of it. What's your thinking? When would you think that you would purchase these tanks? And again, you just got to bear with me, right? Lots of considerations here, right? You buy them, they sit out in the weather, right? You buy them, is there a warranty? Is the clock ticking on the warranty? I understand that you want to get ahead of it, but, we're doing a budget for next year. Next year starts in a month, so we're talking, 13 months out. do we want this $500,000 in next year's budget?
Yes, we do, because we anticipate, and it's already been seen, we want to make sure that the tanks are available. Right now, I believe it was at a 9-month lead time? Yeah, a 9-month lead time once we put the order. So that is one of the main considerations behind that.
Okay. The next question is probably more for Mr. Miller and Mr. Tedder. So there have been discussions about potential grants, but I think more importantly, proceeds from litigation. We've joined mass litigation, or whatever the term is. Can you find out, so there's two parts to this. One is, can you find out for us what we think we're going to get, when we're going to get it? And then I think the second question I have is, this is a shared utility. So I want to make sure that this $5 million that we're going to spend to do this, the entire cost is not borne by the residents of the city of Rehoboth. So I want to know how we're going to recoup those costs from the people that are not, from all the users. I don't want to say the people that are not residents of Rehoboth, it's from all the users. I want to know what the methodology is going to be to recoup those costs. And the methodology just can't be, well, we've got money in the fund balance, so we'll use that, because I'm going to always make the argument that this is the city of Rehoboth Beach's utility, so that's the residents of Rehoboth Beach's money. So need some sort of methodology.
Yeah, we can
That's all I got.
certainly come up with that, and yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, so I'm not, just thank you for answering the questions. I'm not, great clarification, not opposed to what your request. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. One thing real quick, Mayor, my apologies. Brought with me here Robert Downs. He's the water superintendent. Been with the city quite a number of years. Frankly, want to brag on him, does an amazing job.
Thank you. Commissioner Good?
So I appreciate all of this, and I'm all about infrastructure. I've always worried that our infrastructure is aging and should be the top priority. But I had a more general question, and I think Mr. Tedder and Mr. Miller will probably be dealing with this. I'm very concerned when we provide water in bulk to Dewey Beach and to many other communities like North Shores, of this purchase of water from Tidewater Utilities out by the Walmart to help us deal with the peak demand period in July. I'm wondering if if you could explore this. It might make more sense, since we're selling water in bulk to Dewey, which is not as profitable per gallon as what we sell, say, to North Shores. Henlopen Acres has its own treatment plant, apparently. If we could arrange for Dewey in the summer to purchase some of its water, let them enter into the agreement with Tidewater. We have autonomy. Like, I'm worried that we shouldn't give that up, and we should let some of our customers, especially Dewey Beach, who where we're not making as much profit per 100,000 gallons, negotiate with Tidewater. I don't know if you have had ever thought of maybe rethinking this purchase from Tidewater Utilities.
Commissioner, I can give you some thoughts on that. So it's not necessarily a purchase from Tidewater, it's an interconnect, so it's for redundancy. So we wouldn't plan on purchasing water from Tidewater unless it was in the event of an emergency. Redundancy is typically recommended with water systems, so if something happened to our plant or we didn't have enough water or not enough capacity, that's when we would use it, but it wouldn't be a standing thing. It would just be the ability to turn open the pipe if we needed it.
But I mean, last summer we had a sort of, congruence of events where Henlopen Acres plant failed, and it happened to be, of course, like July 4th weekend when we had peak demand, and we had to put in place water restrictions, which frankly really don't work well in Dewey Beach, since the water unfortunately is unmetered there. So their ability to conserve is close to zero, or their incentive to conserve is just not high. So I mean, I appreciate what you're saying about redundancy, but it seems to me we could create our own redundancy by reducing what we sell to Dewey and asking Dewey to obtain some of its water from Tidewater. Like, to me, that's how I would have approached it if we're up against some, you know, some fairly high demand, as we are probably from the third week of June until the second week of August.
Mayor, if I could, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Commissioner
Mayor, if I
Pierre.
could. So I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is that, you know, this is a shared utility, so we share all the costs. We certainly don't want to be encouraging any of our partners that share in our costs to go get their water from somewhere else. So I feel like the approach that's been recommended, which is a one-way interconnect to provide us redundancy only, you know, as needed, makes sense. I would, you know, you'll write the contract, but I mean, I think the contract needs to be, with Tidewater, needs to be real simple, one way, you know, probably 4th of July. I don't want to say 4th of July weekend, but in case of emergency, we'll need it.
Exactly.
And I'm not for encouraging, you know, our partners to go get their water from somewhere else, because that's just going to raise the rates for the rest of us. Thank you.
Commissioner Saunders?
And, Mr. Tedder, am I not correct that we buy it wholesale and sell it retail? Aren't we making a profit on what if we had to buy water from Tidewater, I think we're paying $5, and aren't we still selling it for $7.15 or something to Dewey? So we still make a profit, am I correct?
I think it's an accurate representation.
Thank you.
The contract expires with Dewey Beach at the end of this year.
Right.
So we're going to negotiate a new 5-year contract.
Currently, I think it's $5.05 per 1,000 gallons.
That's correct. And the way, you know, I worked on that with Hans Medlars, and basically we approach it by calculating actual costs, and we had a lot of data on that. So we'll see what happens for the next 5 years.
And one thing to mention about Dewey Beach, we do not work on their transmissions on the pipes. You know, as Commissioner Good said, it's not metered. So once it goes to their pump station along Route 1, Coast Highway, you know, the water department does not work on any of the piping. That's done by the county. Correct. Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Commissioner Marker?
I just had one question. Just for clarification's sake, going back to the issue with the PFAS, the guidance that we're getting from that in terms of, you know, how we're proceeding, we're planning for these future requirements. I am in reading in the news and the upheaval that we're seeing now with the federal government and some of these regulatory agencies. I assume we're taking guidance from the state with regard to that. I mean, we're trying to comply with EPA guidelines or proposed EPA guidelines, but are we communicating with the state with regard to how that is going to roll out?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
We have, and also Pannoni would also be dealing with the state. And also, as far as financing, they will also work with us for any potential grants.
Okay.
Since, you know, that's
I just
their
want to
expertise.
Be clear on that. Thank you.
Go ahead. Okay. Francis, if you could wait until they're done and.
One thing I want to bring up about water is that the water department does do their own taps. On say like last year, when we installed the water lines for the temporary restrooms, that was done by Caswell, as well as we had a significant, we had to change out our meter for Henlopen condos and hotels this past, that was done last week. Basically, all the piping in the vault was redone, and that was a joint effort both by the water department and Caswell.
I got one more question, I'm sorry.
Before we drop water, we'll go to members of the public. Commissioner Thier?
Thank you, Mayor. Back to the 9-month lead time. So this is an accounting question. We got to pay it all up front?
I imagine so.
Just find out, just
We can
find out
find
what we
out,
got to do
yeah.
so we know. So if we don't have to pay it all up front, then, just understand the timing of the payments. Like I said, I'm not opposed to it, but let's get our CIP correct. So if it's half up front, you need $250. Thank you.
Okay, next would be wastewater. Go ahead, Evan.
Okay, let me go to
Oh,
the members of the public.
my apologies.
Francis, would you like to comment, state your name and relationship to the city, and we got a
My 3 minutes.
3-minute timeline. Keep an eye.
Francis
Thank-
Kelleher, Stokely Street. Probably a good segue between water and wastewater, because it's linked. Okay, so Henry,
Could you get closer to the mic,
oh, I'm
please?
sorry, yeah, I gotta read my thing though. So given the increasing costs for purifying our well water, and I appreciate the work you've done in developing a backup plan for, given our ongoing drought and the drought conditions and what happened last summer, I support having a backup plan to assure that we can always have drinking water. But what I want to raise up, and I thought maybe Mr. Tedder, with his experience living out in the Southwest, I wanted to raise up an idea. So I am really concerned about the rising costs to get good drinking water, useful water, and and you're well aware, Mr. Matlows, as Mr. Williams was before you, of the problem I have at my house. So my neighbor irrigates his property twice a day, 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the evening. The water all rolls over to me, floods my yard, I won't go into all that gory details about slugs the size of mice that I catch in my crawl space. But the water also goes out into the street, all of that. We've had those discussions. So I've read online that other cities, this is an idea, it's a long-term kind of idea that would probably involve a lot of money. But anyway, I want to throw it out there that you guys would consider it almost as a future, maybe capital investment work that could help, long-term with the water situation. That since we can tie into our wastewater cleaned effluent, treated wastewater, it seems like, yes, you can also tie out. I made that up, but tie out. And I've read about other cities, other municipalities where their water does go into the oceans. These are cities that the bulk of their water goes into the ocean, but they have also a system before it flows into the ocean. It gets tied into, separate city piping that is then used to provide irrigation to people who want irrigation, even the city itself, our city parks, or people. So it's like a network almost that parallels the good drinking water, but it's providing the clean treated effluent. And I don't know if they do that out in the Southwest too. But so that's the idea. And it's just the idea of trying to deal with these ongoing, and really huge costs that we're going to incur now and into the future to have pure drinking water.
Thank you, Francis. That's something that obviously they're not going to answer today, but
Right.
maybe we can get together with you. Thank you very much. Jay, you have a comment on water?
I know a couple of things about PFAS.
Your
It's in
name, your name?
Jay Legree, and I live on Prospect Street. It's in the groundwater. We're going to have PFAS for a long, long time. The EPA is like a battleship, and they're aiming toward PFAS right now. If you get the bulletins from the Delaware River Basin Commission, you'll see that they are concentrating on PFAS far up north of us. Philadelphia puts 360 million gallons of water a day in the Delaware Bay, and their commission doesn't want them dumping PFAS. So they're really worried about PFAS. PFAS is an organic contaminant, and activated charcoal works really well on PFAS. But there are other emerging contaminants that act at PFAS, not like PFAS, but like surfactants and all the stuff that you put in your cosmetics and pharmaceuticals. PFAS won't, or activated charcoal won't take them out. And that's why they're looking at resin exchange. The old-fashioned water softeners is resin exchange, although it's much more complicated than that. But we can spend money on activated charcoal, and we'll be able to use that for years. So don't worry about going obsolete. But it is kind of nice to be thinking about an ion exchange, although it's a resin and it's fairly elementary, but it's good to do that. So it's great to do that. The next question, or the next thing I want to say is, aren't we going to drill any more water wells? How are we coming on that? That would solve Commissioner Good's problem. Are we thinking about it?
Yes, we are. Well 6 has been out of service for 8 years. And we're currently talking to one potential location. But that's not a short-term thing. It would be at least a year before, before we'd, probably closer to a year and a half, but once we would get approval to drill at a specific location before that well would actually be operational.
So there may be some answers to that purchase from Tidewater that we may even bypass them down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Anybody else? Thank you. Henry, go ahead and continue, please.
Evan, do you want to?
Sure. I can start, and then Henry, if you want to take over. So in the wastewater department, chemicals obviously is one of the highest expenses related to treating the effluent. We do have city sludge hauling at $115,000. This represents our hauling to the inland base treatment plant, correct?
And South Coastal.
And South Coastal. Electric at $250,000 again for the various facilities, pumps, motors, et cetera. General maintenance, this covers a lot of the miscellaneous things that we require to continue to operate the plant. So belts, shafts, clarifier parts, breakers, oil, check valves, et cetera. And you will notice that this year we went a little bit over budget. I want to give some credit to Henry for identifying the prop shaft and the prop and, rectifying that issue so that we don't have that happen again. So again, general maintenance covers a lot of, the equipment that goes into the plant. And then finally, debt service, $3 million. So that's a component of, the components include the outfall, principal and interest, the various plant improvements that we've done, and then the 3 loans from Sussex County, A, B, and C. Again, totaling roughly $3 million. And we can take any questions you might have.
Mayor, Mayor?
Commissioner Saunders?
I'm just to familiarize myself, please, Mr. Miller. When you say sludge hauling and it goes down to South Central, down to the sewer plant, what do they do with it that we couldn't do here?
Well, go ahead. So with Phase 3B, right now we haul sludge. The container trucks are about 5,500 gallons. The tanker trucks, 5,500 gallons each. to either South Coastal or Inland Bays, kind of wherever the county is requesting us to take it at that time. And what they have a belt filter press, which takes the sludge from 2% solids to about 18% solids. And it's kind of like it's actually called cake. And it's a kind of almost like grass, hay consistency. Really doesn't smell that bad either. And they have that both at Inland Bays and at South Coastal. And we are in phase 3B. We will have our own belt filter press, in which will be operational in April. And with the new agreement, the county will come, we'll put it in dumpsters, and the county will come and pick it up. And we're very fortunate. Let me also say Bill Woods and Paul Hignett, the manager and assistant manager. And Paul was with the county before. He's been with the city for about 5 years, and he was with the county before. And he has extensive knowledge in belt filter press operation, which will be huge for us in the coming months and years to be able to train our employees in the use of it.
The 115,000 will eventually go away.
It'll be different. Mr. Woods went through and worked with the county based on costs, looking at it will be different in that instead of us hauling the sludge, they will come and take the cake, and they will charge us for that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Go ahead, Henry.
That's really all
That's it for wastewater?
I have.
Can you advance to the next slide?
There we go.
So next we can go through the various revenues that we have. So we have 2 slides on revenues. This slide is on the enterprise fund revenues. Again, enterprise fund being wastewater and water. And then the slide to follow will be the general fund revenues. So just wanted to touch on some of the major revenue sources. So in wastewater, we have the metered sewer, which is the Rehoboth Beach customers at $3.69 million. North Shores, we have $450,000. We did increase that budget slightly based on actual numbers for the last 2 years. Dewey Beach, we have budgeted $1.8 million. Again, we addressed the variance earlier today about the over billing and then the repayment, so bringing that number back to actuals at $1.8 million. Henlopen Acres at $190,000. We also account for the interest on the investments that we currently have, estimating $250,000 for the upcoming fiscal year, and then the various capital contributions. The capital contributions relate specifically to roughly 42%, estimating 42% of the county share of Phase 4. Again, this may change, but wanted to at least account for that revenue. And then also capital contribution, which relates to, let me see here, the 2 outfall payments and then 1 payment on the $12 million plant loan. So that accounts for the capital contributions. In water, again, metered water in town, customers, $1.28 million. Metered water, so out of town, $2.2 million. And then for Dewey Beach, $1.15 million. So we can answer any questions you might have on the enterprise revenues before we move into general fund.
Mayor, just a quick question. The out-of-town metered water, a number of accounts that exist on?
Out-of-town.
Approximate?
It's about 3,000. We've got,
Okay.
3,000 in town, 3,000 out.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Commissioner Good?
Mr. Miller, could I just confirm that in 2027, that the water rates for in-town residents are supposed to remain at $6.30 per gallon, but at that time, normally the wastewater treatment rates were supposed to rise considerably, Having said that, since unexpectedly, we raised them in March of 2024, I think about 28 or 29%. What is the current plan, especially for in-town ratepayers, who I now believe are at around $21 per 1,000 gallons for wastewater treatment and $6.30 for water? Like, what is your current plan with those rates? And also, could you confirm those tranches that were laid out in 2019 by the Abrahams Group? I believe one of them is 2027 for rate hikes on wastewater treatment.
Yeah, we'd have to produce that report again. I don't have it handy, but as far as revenue and rates for 2027, we've projected those rates to be flat. So you'll see that the revenue for the 2027 projected column is flat and aligns with the proposed 2026 budget.
Well, that's good, and I would like us to consider, given the rate hike which took effect with the fiscal year 2025 budget back in March of 2024, that we not hold ourselves to those major rate increases required by the Abrahams Group back in 2019. Just something to consider. Rehoboth Beach in-town ratepayers have suffered enough. Thank you.
Jay?
Jay Legree, and I just want to check exactly how many wastewater customers do we have? I've been using 2,500 as a general estimate.
I believe it's about 5,500 customers.
Not 55.
Oh, that's water customers, 2,400
Is it-
wastewater.
Are you close? Is it right at 2,400?
23.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Because we're using about 800,000 gallons a day out the outfall. And I'm just trying to make calculations. Thank you.
Evan?
Sure, so we can move on to the general fund revenues, property tax. We've budgeted that at 2.66 million. Property transfer tax, 2.3 million. For rental tax, we addressed this a little bit, but again, we've increased that projection to 3.4 million for the upcoming fiscal year. Again, the vote that was taken to increase the gross receipts rental tax was to increase it from 6 to 7%, but that was effective on contracts after April 1st. So assuming that a majority of the contracts for the 2024 season were entered into prior to the 2024 season, we thought it was appropriate to adjust the revenue, knowing that it's nearly a year now has passed, so those 2025 projections, or the 2025 bookings likely fall under that 7%. Hotel accommodations tax, 1.56 million, again, keeping that flat at the 3%, which we are capped on by the General Assembly. For parking, total of 9.86 million, and this is a combination of permits, certainly credit cards, and pay-by-phone revenue. Again, we continue to see a large adoption of pay-by-phone as the payment method for parking. So coin revenue is drastically decreasing, so we have reduced the projected revenue in the proposed budget. Accordingly, we even see fewer adoption of credit cards or fewer use of credit cards, but a greater use and adoption of the pay-by-phone method. Building permits, 896,000. I had some conversations this morning with the building inspectors about potential projects that are coming up in the upcoming fiscal year. Certainly, we could see a large influx in revenue based on where some of the large hotel projects stand. The 2% and the 3% that we collect is collected at the time of permit pickup. So I think for the next meeting, we might go back and look at those numbers a little bit more closely. Nothing really dramatic in the current fiscal year. So again, we did a 25 projection. No dramatic building permits, were pulled this year. We do have some projects in the pipeline that we might see permits pulled for this year on Rehoboth Avenue. But again, right now budgeting $896,000, and we'll take a look at that for the next meeting. And then finally, refuse is another large revenue generator at $815,000 we're budgeting. And that's all I have. We could take any questions you might have.
Mayor, if I could, please.
There.
Thank you. So two things. Now that we're on revenues, we had spoke earlier about the surplus and coming back with a list of, not only as part of the budget process, but as going to be required if we pass the fund balance earlier. I do agree with Commissioner Markert. I would like to see on the list getting our tax rate back down to property tax rate back down to what it was before we raised it last year. So if you could include that on the list for us to consider. The second thing is related to parking, and we're very quickly going to come to the end of the the end of the budget here. And I would like us to start looking at parking revenues really as soon as starting in April, the latest May, so we can prepare for the following year. As we've discussed, or I think kind of generally discussed, I think everything comes on the table with parking. Different rates, different zones, surge pricing, whatever it may be. But there's a lot of analysis that needs to be done. So I think the sooner we can get started, so maybe you can come back to us maybe in April and just kind of tell us how you want to proceed with doing that analysis. I would appreciate.
Sure, that sounds good. And I will make note that in your regular meeting packet for this afternoon, the Chamber's kind of exploratory parking meeting that they had with Chamber members and city staff was also present. Their summary of that meeting and recommendations are in your packet.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those were my two things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Anybody else? Commissioner Shanowski.
Just one, I don't know if I have a strong opinion either way, but it's something that I've become aware of. I think the rentals for this upcoming season are not great, and I think that a portion of that has to do with the state implementing a short-term rental tax as well. So whereas people renting in Rehoboth were 6% not too long ago, it's now almost 12%. And Sussex County opted not to incorporate their own tax rate. So I'm finding that a lot of people are renting outside of the city limits of Rehoboth because it is significantly cheaper to do so. And I think in the short term that may have an impact for the rental tax in the city here. So I think just something to keep in mind, and I would probably just take that into consideration when trying to budget and make assumptions.
Sure.
Mayor?
Commissioner Good?
Yeah, I echo what Commissioner Shanowski has said, and for better or worse, now the likelihood of people renting, on the black market or what, not going through normal channels, just advertising like in the Washington Post and dealing with people directly has increased. So we have to be very conservative in those projections. I'm just hearing anecdotally that people do not have, like, they're using, most of them are using February 1st or February 15th as a basis for their homes. They're not getting the repeat bookings or the level of bookings like of the 12 or 14 peak weeks that they've gotten in past years, although the summer of 2024 was also a bit soft demand. And I would like to support both Commissioner Tier and Commissioner Markert, that yes, we could have a rollback of the unneeded property tax hike that was effective, with the bills due August 31st, 2024, but that will require that we rein in some spending. Overall, you can't be reducing the revenue from property taxes without cutting some consultancies and other things, and I have not been successful up here in asking all of you to really see whether a consultancy is necessary, given that we have such a large city staff and that has grown considerably. So hopefully we could get that done and see the property tax bills revert to the August 31st, 2023 level.
Mayor?
Commissioner Gossett?
Yeah, just to point out, and Mr. Miller, if you could help me with this, of the 7 categories listed there on your general fund revenues, if you will, the only, and I hate to use the word guaranteed, but predictable and guaranteed is the property tax, correct? All others are based on use.
That is our most reliable revenue source, yes.
And with the present situation, I know in the country of many, many layoffs in federal employees, that's one of our major contributing to the economy here. So again, I just caution those other 6 categories of taking a very hard look at them.
Sure.
It's with people without jobs, selling their homes, moving elsewhere, it will have a major impact on all those other categories. Thanks.
Well, I've always brought attention to one of those revenue categories is, I think, contributions or donations or something, incoming. And that's mostly for monies coming into donations to the Beach Patrol and others. And that's nothing that we can say, hey, we want to, let's double that next year. It's just, that is what it is. So we have a very limited number of resources for revenues, yeah. Anybody else?
Go ahead.
So ultimately, this is the last slide of the program that we have for you today, but I'm happy to address any other questions that you have related to the budget or projects, things of that nature at this point. If not, again, our next budget meeting is scheduled for March 10th. So at that meeting, we will discuss community partner contributions, which includes grant requests, address final questions, adjustments, comments, and we'll also try to bring back all of the deliverables from this meeting, including the bonus scheme and health insurance options,
Mr.
as discussed.
Mayor and Mr. Tedder.
Commissioner, good.
Only one request in terms of long-range planning there, and we can make all the assumptions we want on revenues, especially from those variable sources like parking and rental taxes. I'm concerned that we had a Baltimore-Wilmington Avenue Streetscape Task Force. I believe it met from approximately 2018 until COVID sort of put it on hiatus. We paid a consultant throughout that. The normal procedure is to get financing in place before you spend money on consultants studying something. I don't think we're going to have the probably close to $60 million for that project anytime soon. So I'm disappointed to see that we have as one of the possible items we could use this so-called surplus on be this reconvening this Baltimore-Wilmington Avenue Streetscape Task Force. To me, that's a no-go. That's a bad use of taxpayer money. Maybe a few years from now, if we somehow have some major infusions of grants from the EPA, for instance, to fund this, $5 million project or whatever, maybe things will be different. But I hope we could get some support to not reconvene that task force, because that task force cost us money, and it's not money well spent until the financing has been figured out.
Commissioner, I do think that's an assumption. We never mentioned reconvening the task force necessarily, and I do think we'd have to do any streetscape projects as a piecemeal approach. Obviously, we don't have a $60 million surplus, so we'd have to, my recommendation would be focusing on that first block of Baltimore to coincide with our Beach Patrol facility and the One Rehoboth project, because we could probably have some cost share there with some improvements they're making. But yeah, we certainly wouldn't be able to tackle the whole thing.
Well, I brought that up because it was on one slide and it's been brought up in the past. And that cost sharing, yeah, could you delineate, are some of the hotels on Baltimore Avenue actually have they stated that they're willing to do cost sharing? Because in the past, that
Mayor,
hasn't
if I could,
happened.
please. I think we're going to have plenty of time to discuss this issue at a future meeting, so I would like to move on.
Well, we did indicate that those projects and that thing would be a future agenda topic. So let's defer to that. Is there anything else on here before we go to the public? No further comments, questions by the commissioners? We'll actually go into the portion of the agenda that says commissioner announcements and comments. Does anybody have anything? I just review future meeting dates. Remember, 2 o'clock today, we have a regular meeting. With that, we come to a citizen comment, and this is typically for comments off topic. Francis, do you have something off topic? Just your name and relationship to the city again, please.
Frances Kelleher, resident. Last year, I did an assessment of what the budgets were for all the cities in Delaware. Mr. Tedder, you weren't here. But anyway, found out that when you look at it, our little town is sort of dead in the middle of about 79 things. But yet, our budget is way up at the level of the 9th largest city in Delaware, which of course isn't that big, but it's Smyrna. So that's out of whack. What I did this year, I looked at the beach towns, Bethany, Dewey, Ocean City, Maryland. I tried to look at Cape May, but I couldn't get through their weeds. Looked at Lewis and that. So I just want to throw this out to you, and this is your challenge. And I thought that part of your coming was to help us get a grip on the overall size of our budget. But I was dismayed when I read the news or saw the news, and that's why I'm here today, saying, at least the news, that we might be looking at a $5 million increase in our budget from last year of 38. So I want to throw out, why is it that Bethany, which has the same length of a boardwalk, the same similar population, the same-ish similar land size as Rehoboth, it's very close, and yet their budget last year was around 25 million versus our 38 million. If you look at Dewey, Little Dewey is 1/3 of the population, 1/3 of the land mass. Theirs was 8 million. Now, if you try to equate that or normalize it to our size, you'd multiply it by 3. 3 times 8, 24 million. I did crazy big Ocean City, $109 million budget, but they have 7,000 citizens. They have 3 miles of boardwalk versus, say, Bethany and us have 1 mile each. And when you divide, and then they have an influx of something crazy like 250 to 350,000 people in the summer versus our 25,000 to maybe 40,000 I've seen in numbers coming in. So they have a huge, many factors of what ours is. And if you divide that into, if you take 7 or 10 and divide it into their budget, we are such an outlier in the magnitude of our budget. Our budget needs to be cut down. We need to cut it down and not be adding to it. We need to have an objective to lower the budget systematically and then keep it where it should be. Why is our budget so out of whack compared to everybody else, even beach communities?
Thank you, Francis.
Mayor, if I could, please.
Share some of your ideas with us, if you would.
Mayor, if I could, please.
Commissioner Thayer.
Yeah, I'm just going to direct this to Mr. Tedder and to Mr. Miller. So I think it's important that we're comparing apples to apples. You know, these other communities do not have wastewater expenses. They don't have water. So I'm not going to say the number. I'll just rely on you to respond as you feel appropriate to make sure that we're looking apples to apples. Thank you.
And just one comment. So you're exactly right about the utilities, and our general fund is 26 million. So very similar to what Bethany Beach.
Mr. Mayor?
And that shouldn't be interpreted as, you know, I don't disagree with your underlying concern about the expenses and the growth of expenses. I just wanted there to be, when you're comparing the other communities to us, making sure that you've got apples to apples. So not, yeah, thank you.
I totally was trying to compare apples to apples because I am very cognizant of a lot of times there is not a comparison of like to like and special situation to special situation. But when I did look at the Bethany budget, and again, I thought, gosh, maybe the commissioners could go down and go to the Bethany hearings and find out, well, what is it? But they do segregate. I didn't, they have separate then items, their sanitation and their water, they have enterprise. So that is, I was trying to compare totals, right totals to right totals.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Good?
I appreciate Francis supplying us with data, and in fact, there are a lot of things that are out of whack here. Our legal fees at 2% of our budget, that's out of control, and towns like Lewis and Bethany, I believe they are run in a way that they don't invite so much litigation, so they've been able to keep a handle on their legal fees. To me, legal fees are a waste of money. A lot of the time, we've gotten bad advice or no advice when we needed it, but too much advice and too much controlling advice that ended up delaying things. So normally in this situation, most departments in this city, except for streets, except the ones over which Mr. Matlos is in charge, should cut their budgets by 10%. But instead, I guess we haven't dealt with it yet, we're proposing growing the IT department by 33%. So I'd like to see more departments put forth ideas to cut their budget by 10%. Maybe that will mean we, this year, put a moratorium on traveling to conferences. Is it necessary for Mr. Tedder to have gone to Pittsburgh and I think to Denver in the last 12 months and probably other destinations of which I didn't learn because I didn't happen to contact him during the period he was out of town? So we could look at some of these discretionary expenses, but each department head should figure out a way to cut spending by 10%. I think it's imperative, I think it's urgent, and I think we're at almost the full $75 million debt limit, and what we did is just added to that in early December. This is bad governance, and this is too much. If you look at the amount of debt carried by each of the full-time residents in this town, it's frightening.
All right, there being no further business, no further citizen comment, I adjourn this meeting at 12:22. Thank you.